Chapter 1499. How could she be joking? No matter how low Poplar Fruit's EQ was, he wasn't that stupid. Jing Yujie had already acted so infatuated earlier, so how could Poplar Fruit believe that Jing Yujie was joking? Yeah. I was joking. I was just teasing you. I just wanted to see if you really had feelings for me. And then you said yes. Hehe. When Jing Yujie laughed, her expression was a little gloomy for a moment. But she quickly recovered and laughed heartily. Alright, I won't tease you anymore. You don't really believe that I want to be your lover, do you? Hehe, I don't look down on myself that much. Although Jing Yujie's every word was very confusing to Poplar Fruit wouldn't doubt his feelings just now. Jing Yujie was hiding her feelings of disappointment. So he looked at Jing Yujie worriedly, not knowing what to say. Should he say, I know you're not lying to her? Jing Yujie was obviously giving them a way out. She was too smart and too considerate of Poplar Fruit, so she forcefully suppressed her emotions. But if Poplar Fruit still wanted to go against this and insist on sorting out the matter with Jing Yujie, it wouldn't be good for him and Jing Yujie. Furthermore, because he still couldn't accept Jing Yujie, it would only lead to one result. Jing Yujie would be hurt even more. Alright, don't look at me like that. Jing Yujie acted as if she was talking to a normal friend. She smiled naturally and said, Your wife is pregnant, quickly go home and take care of her. Why are you still staying here? Jing Yujie turned around with her back facing Poplar Fruit and said in a clear voice, Oh yeah, you still have to come for the meeting tomorrow. It's not time for you to take maternity leave yet. The strange feeling in Poplar Fruit's heart became even stronger. But as he looked at Jing Yujie's skinny back, his heart began to ache. But he couldn't say it out loud. Logic told him that going home was the best choice, as Jing Yujie had said. He opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, I'll go back first. You have to take care of yourself. Don't think too much. Jing Yujie didn't respond. She just waved her hand behind her, indicating for Poplar Fruit to leave quickly. Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth. Reason prevailed. He took his things and left without any hesitation. The door closed. After a long time, Jing Yujie's shoulders began to tremble. If there was a camera that could rotate to the front of Jing Yujie, it would definitely be able to see that her slightly lowered head was full of tears. Sob. Jing Yujie's cries were suppressed in her throat, but the falling tears quickly wet the documents in her hands. This was no longer something she could control. In the huge office, only Jing Yujie's figure was left, and only her choked sobs could be heard. In the end, she cried so much that she couldn't maintain her standing posture. She quietly hid behind the office desk, hugged her legs and cried in a corner. The grievance in her heart seemed to have overturned the Pacific Ocean. Tears flowed endlessly from her eyes and rolled down. Why? However, no one knew about her grievance and her repeated questioning. She didn't want anyone to know about her weakness. Poplar Fruit didn't know either. Or rather, he could vaguely feel it, but he didn't dare to think or guess. He already owed enough. When Poplar Fruit returned home, Kiki and Fong Beibei hadn't returned yet. Fong Beibei had to go to school in the afternoon, so she insisted on going to pick up Kiki. Poplar Fruit didn't stop her at that time. Fong Beibei was only 2 months pregnant, and her belly didn't show any signs of pregnancy yet. Naturally, there was no need to worry too early. However, even though Fong Beibei and Kiki hadn't returned home yet, Poplar Fruit still felt a little guilty, so he went to take a shower and changed his clothes. Previously, when he had intimate contact with Jing Yujie, there was some scent on him. Although Fong Beibei wouldn't check, Poplar Fruit was still worried. In fact, Poplar Fruit was overthinking. Fong Beibei didn't care much about these details, and she didn't even ask why Poplar Fruit took a shower. When she returned, she was just like Kiki, smiling happily from beginning to end. When I went to school, the teachers and classmates heard about it and they all looked at me like I was some kind of big shot. Fong Beibei smiled like my daughter and pulled Poplar Fruit to talk about the interesting things that happened that day. One by one they came to look at me, and then a classmate said that pregnant women shouldn't sit in front of the computer, because they would be radiated by the computer. She even said it vividly and copied the attitude that the classmate was eager to show off. He was right. Poplar Fruit laughed. So our teacher moved me to the back of the classroom. Fong Beibei giggled. He even gave me a big stack of paper and said, Fong Beibei, you can sit here at ease. Don't use the computer, you can practice your calculation skills. Poplar Fruit couldn't help but laugh. Kiki poked her head over and asked, "Then Mama can't watch TV in the future, right?" "Yes. Not only can't you watch TV, you can't use your phone or iPad." Poplar Fruit pulled his daughter into his arms and laughed. "Then you might as well kill me." Fong Beibei rolled her eyes and laughed. Of course, this was a joke between Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. Didn't he see that Fong Beibei was making a face at Poplar Fruit? That's quite tragic. Chi-Chi, on the other hand, believed her. She looked at Fong Beibei with sorrow in her heart. She felt that it was scary to not have a television or anything like that. Could she not watch cartoons in the future? Don't listen to your father's nonsense. Actually, the radiation isn't that serious. Also, it'll be fine if you wear an anti-radiation suit. Fong Beibei laughed. "Oh right, I need to call Shanshan and ask her to go shopping with me tomorrow to buy some clothes." As she spoke, she took her phone and walked to the side to make a call. She didn't think of asking Poplar Fruit to go shopping with her because Poplar Fruit was very busy. Also, it was boring to go shopping with Poplar Fruit. He couldn't give any advice about girls. As for the problem of money, that was even less of a problem. She had an unlimited overdraft of Poplar Fruit's card with her. Kiki stayed behind and chatted with her father about what had happened today. "Grandpa and Grandma said that they're coming to visit me the day after tomorrow. They'll buy a lot of delicious food for me and there'll be new Barbie dolls too," the little girl said happily. In her heart, she was already daydreaming about the happy days after her grandparents' arrival. Poplar Fruit smiled and rubbed the little girl's head. He understood the reason. His parents-in-law were mainly here to visit their newly pregnant daughter. Kiki was also one of their main targets. The elders wanted to serve Kiki well. They were worried that Kiki would be unhappy after the birth of a new brother or sister. In any case, they wanted Kiki to feel her importance so that her brother or sister wouldn't be bullied by her. Poplar Fruit knew that his daughter was kind-hearted, but he didn't intend to say it out loud. In any case, it was a good thing for the elders to care for their daughter more. "I repeat, I'm really not torturing Sister Zheng," Xiao Han guarantees with his character. It seems that he doesn't have much character left. Chapter 1500. After returning home, because Fong Beibei did not notice his strange behavior at all, Poplar Fruit was finally relieved. He was also somewhat emotional. After all, he was not the kind of playboy who could cheat without batting an eyelid. This also strengthened his determination to be a good husband and a good father. To Poplar Fruit's relief, when he went to the company for a meeting the next day, Xing Yujie did not mention the awkwardness and emotional entanglement that had happened the day before. On the contrary, Xing Yujie behaved very normally. She talked to him as usual. When it was necessary to hit him, she hit him. When it was necessary to make a fuss, she made a fuss. She had a kind of carefree and unrestrained manner, as if nothing had happened the day before. Poplar Fruit was more or less worried, but he did not pretend to be a good person anymore. The more entanglement there was, the greater the damage it would cause. In the end, Poplar Fruit looked at Xing Yujie with some complicated feelings. He went home after the meeting. However, his sixth sense told him that when he walked out of the building, there was a pair of eyes watching him from upstairs, unwilling to leave for a long time. However, Poplar Fruit had no choice. He sighed softly and turned to leave. The house felt like it was in turmoil and chaos. It was mainly because after hearing the news that Fong Beibei was pregnant, Mother Fong rushed over. Then Poplar Fruit's godmother and Song Jiwen's mother also received a request from Poplar Fruit's mother, Su Jinfeng, to come over and join in the fun. When the two elders gathered together, naturally they would not be nice to Poplar Fruit, who asked this guy to be an expert in misfires. Previously, he had inexplicably brought back a daughter, and now Fong Beibei was pregnant before marriage. Although the young couple had already registered their marriage in the eyes of the elders, if they did not hold a wedding banquet, they were not considered married at all. During the day, the two elders took Fong Beibei for a checkup, and at night, they urged Poplar Fruit to hurry up and hold the wedding with Fong Beibei. Otherwise, when the pregnancy was obvious, wouldn't they be laughed at by their relatives? However, at that time, Yang Guo and Fong Beibei were planning to get married after the Spring Festival next year. At that time, they even informed their classmates and asked them to apply for leave in advance so that they could all come over for a gathering. If they suddenly brought forward the wedding, it would disrupt all the plans. However, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei's protest was immediately cruelly suppressed by the three parties. Even Su Jinfeng called from her hometown to give Poplar Fruit a scolding. How could a marriage be delayed because of a few guests' schedule problems? They had no choice but to start a new plan now. Seeing that the elders were staying up late talking on the phone and looking at the almanac to see the time, Fang Beibei also called her best friends the next day, and Qin Anlin, who was holding Song Debao, who was not even a year old yet, and hurriedly discussed the wedding plan at the end of November. Poplar Fruit listened to them and he slipped out with the excuse of continuing the meeting, leaving the mess to this group of excited women. When he came back in the evening, he saw that they were still discussing in high spirits. Even Kiki could not help but join in the fun. So after dinner, Poplar Fruit, Song Jiwen and Wang Yuba, the three men, drove out to play. They went for a ride, sang karaoke and went to a barbecue restaurant for supper. It felt like a bachelor's night in Western countries, where the men went crazy before getting married. Of course, when they came back, they were inevitably caught by the women and scolded, "We were so busy but you went to have fun in the dark." The men, who were beaten up, finally behaved and obediently planned the wedding with the women. Song Jiwen was responsible for the hotel reservations and some procurement work. Who asked Section Chief Song to know so many people? Wang Yuba was also a smart person. He was responsible for accompanying the beauties to shop and bargain, and was responsible for dressing up the bridesmaids beautifully. Of course, he also had to contribute to his best man group. As for Poplar Fruit, he had to call them one by one according to the list provided by the women, explain the reason for the change of date, and invite the guests to attend their wedding. However, within 2 days the news of Fang Beibei's pregnancy had spread all over the world. After all, at this time Poplar Fruit and Kiki received unprecedented attention because of the hit, "Where Are We Going, Dad?", which was still on TV. Although the family kept a low profile and didn't accept any interviews, there were still paparazzi circling around them. The news leaked mainly because after returning to Yongqing, the two elders hurriedly took Fang Beibei to the hospital for a checkup. They were caught off guard, so the ambushing reporters got the first-hand news. The reporters also knew that Poplar Fruit was going to hold their wedding in advance. Suddenly there were all kinds of rumors of a shotgun wedding. Of course, this wasn't bad news. After all, Poplar Fruit and Fang Beibei were already a model couple in the hearts of the audience. The two of them even got a marriage certificate before, so they just lacked a grand wedding. Naturally, the rumors of a shotgun wedding weren't derogatory. On the contrary, after the news spread, Poplar Fruit and Fang Beibei received the blessings of a large number of fans. Many fans even went to Poplar Fruit's Weibo to ask him to take care of their top student goddess. Of course, Kiki's fans also said, "Continue to treat our Kiki well." They were still a little worried that Kiki would be ostracized. Naturally, they didn't have to worry about this. Fang Beibei had always been very good to Kiki, especially after they saw Fang Beibei's performance on the show. Fang Beibei's pregnancy received a lot of attention. Although Poplar Fruit and the rest didn't accept any interviews, they only released a piece of news through Mango Station. Fang Beibei's pregnancy was an unexpected surprise when she went to the hospital for a checkup after recording the show in Western Australia because she wasn't feeling well. Therefore, the last 2 episodes of the show were hyped up even before they were aired, and other stills were released. As a result, in the last episode, when Fang Beibei and the others appeared, the show's viewership ratings broke the record. Putting this hype aside, not long after Poplar Fruit finished recording the show, a bunch of production companies and directors came looking for him. They wanted him and Kiki to shoot movies, TV dramas and advertisements. Naturally, Poplar Fruit wouldn't accept it. He wasn't short of money and he wouldn't use Kiki as his money tree. As for whether his daughter wanted to enter the entertainment industry, he wouldn't make a decision for Kiki. Everything would have to wait until she grew up or until Kiki could judge right from wrong and make her own decisions. However, there was an invitation that made Poplar Fruit a little tempted. It was from a Beijing satellite TV program group that came over after hearing that Fang Beibei was pregnant. They planned a variety show called The Age of the Second Child. The concept of the creation was naturally the more popular issue of the second child policy. They wanted to invite Poplar Fruit's family as guests to participate in the recording of several episodes, especially to show Kiki's care for her younger siblings. However, Poplar Fruit still refused. He was also very busy with his own work at school and publishing house. Fang Beibei was pregnant and needed him to take care of her. He really didn't have time to fly around. There was no other reason. Xiaohan didn't want to be called underwater by everyone anymore. Chapter 1501. Time passed quite quickly, like quicksand between one's fingers. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. In these 2 months, Poplar Fruit was naturally not busy with his and Fong Beibei's wedding. The wedding matters had long been enthusiastically taken over by a group of buddies and Fong Beibei's best friends. After he finished the phone call, he turned his head and immersed himself in his work. In school, Poplar Fruit taught diligently for a month. Previously, he had applied for leave and changed classes a lot. Due to his popularity, Poplar Fruit's classes were always full. Of course, many people did not understand the small languages taught by Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit, who had made time, also attended a few meetings in the school. The main content of the meetings naturally could not be separated from the Eurasian department that they had just started less than half a year ago. Although the Eurasian department had been brewing among the school's higher-ups for a few years before this year, after its first academic year, there were still many problems, big and small, that were not small. Small problems were still manageable. With Yanghua, who could deal with almost all languages as well as many outstanding talents hired from outside, those small problems in teaching could be easily solved. The big problems were a bit troublesome. The most direct problem was also one that they had considered when they were planning before. The popularity of the languages is very divided. There were big languages and small languages and foreign languages. Naturally, there were niche languages and even more niche languages that no one cared about. For example, there were many students who chose Hindi as their third language because Hindi was actually a very important market. For example, it had become the second largest overseas market for domestic mobile phone manufacturers after Africa. Now and in the future, the demand for Hindi language talents would definitely continue to rise. But relatively speaking, ancient Sanskrit, which was more inclined towards academic and not application, was ignored. To be honest, the status of Sanskrit was definitely not low. For example, Latin, Greek, and the Chinese that we use are all among the oldest languages, and the number of documents in Sanskrit is second only to Chinese. However, it had indeed retired from the stage of history. Now, it only existed in academic and religious terms. Since 99.9% of them would not be able to use it after graduation, nor could they be converted into economic value, then what was the point of learning it? The students were very realistic, but no one could deny that their choice was wrong. Because that was the truth. The market determined the demand and economic benefits determined the academic path. Moreover, everyone had their own aspirations. You could not drag others onto your chariot just because you advocated the academic spirit. In the past, the school's idea was to give it a try and keep it open. After all, there was Poplar Fruit, who was a jack of all trades. They could use it as a pilot. If it worked in the future, they would continue to recruit teachers. If it didn't work, they would just remove it. Therefore, even though many people came to Poplar Fruit's Sanskrit class, most of them came to see him or listen to his stories in simple terms. Only 5 people really chose his class, and among them 2 of them were replaced. It seemed that they might not be able to last until the next semester. After all, the onlookers could laugh happily, but the real class had to take an exam. Therefore, the school planned to remove the majors that did not have many people choosing, such as Sanskrit, Danish, Azerbaijani, and so on. The majors that were chosen by less than 10 people were suggested to be removed from the school's catalog of majors. Naturally, the ones that were left behind were the minor languages that had a wide audience. Not to mention the teachers, the school had to spend a lot of money to maintain the survival of these unpopular majors, and it would also arouse the disgust of some students who were replaced. Therefore, instead of barely maintaining it, it was better to invest the resources in this area into languages that had a wider audience, recruit more teachers, and let more students choose a third language that they liked. However, there was also a problem with this. The school could not always be led by the market. If they looked at other majors with the same perspective of survival of the fittest, then shouldn't they remove many of the basic subjects like landscape planning and forensic medicine, and replace them with popular majors like economics, management, or computer science? Therefore, this matter caused a huge debate in the school. It was not because of Poplar Fruit, but because the school's teachers and management department had a lot of differences in opinion. Poplar Fruit had not been in a teaching and management position for too long, so he could understand the thoughts of the students, teachers, and the school. However, he was not willing to remove these subjects. Don't underestimate the unpopular languages that had a small audience. Among the students who were really willing to choose, that was where the academic talents gathered. When others were rushing to choose those languages that were easy to learn and had a high demand for employment in order to earn big money after graduation, the students who were willing to immerse themselves in these languages were destined to be strong and focused. Just like great Master Ji, didn't he also tirelessly study Sanskrit for so many years? Didn't his few students also become the backbone of Beijing University or other related research institutes? Although these people were unknown, and although they might not be able to bring high returns to their alma mater in terms of status and finances, they were indeed the pillars of the university. Without them staying in the university to research and teach, the university would have closed its doors long ago. Therefore, Poplar Fruit's suggestion was to maintain the status quo, but not to force the students to choose. If they were willing to choose, then they should persevere. If they were unwilling, then they should not force them. However, Poplar Fruit also proposed an ambitious idea to expand the scale. He felt that it was wrong to limit the Eurasian minor to the scope of foreign languages. All the teachers and students in the school should have the opportunity to choose the minor courses of the Eurasian minor. The reason was very simple. Yang Guo was doing the opposite. He believed that since many students who learned a foreign language ended up doing all kinds of jobs, and even had to relearn new knowledge from work. After all, most of the time languages were only auxiliary. So why not let those students who were already learning their professional skills also learn a small language? The purpose of learning a minor language was not to let them change their profession to be a translator in the future, but to let them choose a career that was not limited to their own country's company, but to let them join multinational companies or foreign enterprises. That way, with a language that could be used to communicate with foreigners, they would definitely stand at a height that they dared not imagine. Poplar Fruit also drew a new blueprint for the school. After 10, 15, or even more years of accumulation, the school's talents would be favored by foreign enterprises, and even those non-mainstream national enterprises. Once it was graduation season, the school's own job fair would be able to attract local large enterprises from all over the world to come and recruit talents. With this, Higashiyama University, which was heading towards the world and cultivating talents for the world, would be the real rise. Chapter 1502. Poplar Fruit's idea was very good, but of course the reality was also very harsh. This plan would take a long time to implement, and there were many details that needed to be considered. There were many difficulties, and to realize it was no different from a long march of 108,000 miles. But there was still a need to have an ideal. What if it came true? Although Qin Zongdai was furious before, he felt that Poplar Fruit's idea was to attack the foundation of the School of Foreign Languages, and it was very likely to change the School of Foreign Languages from a major university to a purely auxiliary position like an English teaching center. However, Poplar Fruit still persuaded the old man. Because the status of the School of Foreign Languages would not change, but its enrollment position would focus on academic talents and high-level applied talents. Academic talents were like the pedants in the history department, who focused on academic research, and high-level applied talents were to cultivate high-quality translators. Such a change was to change the School of Foreign Languages' current situation of cultivating jack-of-all-trades talents for society. Jack-of-all-trades talents seemed to be able to do any job after graduation, but in fact they were a bit like educated migrant workers, who could not get high wages and excellent social status. Now the School of Foreign Languages was like this. After graduation there were students from all walks of life, but there were very few who could really appeal to society and open up employment channels for their juniors. Even if there were successful people, it was their own excellence and hard work, and their success could not be replicated. For example, the School of Management of Higashiyama University was very good. The students they cultivated walked into many big enterprises, especially accounting. The branches of the four major international accounting firms, PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, Ernst & Young, in South China were almost the world of the School of Management of Higashiyama University. Their success was passed down from generation to generation. Instead of giving up their own specialization and cultivating jack-of-all-trades talents, it was better to focus on professional professors and let the School of Foreign Languages become the cradle of linguists and translators. And sharing and popularizing it would not only make the School of Foreign Languages more outstanding, but also improve the competitiveness of the graduates of the entire school. Of course, Poplar Fruit was not so selfless. He believed that if foreign language learning was made universal in the school, there would be more talents for him to choose from. Poplar Fruit would be overjoyed even if he could get a dozen or so talents in language that he could continue to nurture. Poplar Fruit would try his best to persuade these good seedlings to continue their studies during their postgraduate and doctoral studies, so as to cultivate more linguistic experts for China. Just like him and Chen Zhongdai, they could raise the voice of China in the international association. Of course, all of this was just a beautiful fantasy. Poplar Fruit, Chen Zhongdai, the teachers of the School of Foreign Languages, and the new president of Higashiyama University who supported their idea, would continue to work hard for this idea in the next few years. But at least they had a direction. Compared to the feeling of crossing the river in school, Yang Guo was much more relaxed in New Translation Road publishing firm. That was because the professional managers of New Translation Road were not school administrators. They only needed Poplar Fruit to give some professional advice. After a few days of research, they came up with a set of countermeasures. Simply put, New Translation Road would take the initiative to help the country implement the support policies. Specifically, they would help those publishing houses that wanted to develop foreign business to find foreign publishing channels. There were 3 reasons why New Translation Road Publishing House was able to dominate the industry before. The first, of course, was inseparable from the translation team led by Poplar Fruit. It was mainly because of the existence of a monster like Poplar Fruit. As the vanguard general of New Translation Road Publishing House, he directly fought for half of New Translation Road's market from scratch. Even today, when New Translation Road had developed and expanded, Poplar Fruit's personal translation sales could reach more than 1/5 of the entire company's sales. It could be seen how great Poplar Fruit's contribution was. The second was that their management team was very outstanding. They could run around discussing business and doing marketing plans. The success of New Translation Road was definitely inseparable from their contributions. The third was the New Translation Road's publishing channel that the industry had always been jealous of. Although New Translation Road started with Amazon, Xing Yujie had the foresight to jump out of Amazon's shackles. Instead, they relied on their reputation and a group of elites to cooperate with publishers all over the world and open up their own channels. This was something that other publishing houses could not imitate. And now, this plan was to use New Translation Road's channels to support other publishing houses in the country and help them go out. This caused some controversy among the executives. After all, they were sharing their own business with other publishing houses and their competitors so selflessly. No one would be willing to share this with them. You have to look at the long term. As the big boss, Xing Yujie personally persuaded them. If they looked at the immediate benefits, New Translation Road was indeed not worth it. Moreover, they had cultivated a lot of terrifying opponents for no reason. No matter how they looked at it, it was a losing deal. However, in the long run, New Translation Road could stabilize its position as the industry's leader through this generous performance. It could also gain the support of many publishing houses that were not ambitious. Most importantly, the country would take note of it. Xing Yujie, who came from a political family, understood this principle the best. Supporting the implementation of the country's policies was equivalent to including New Translation Road, a private company, into the ranks of the country's regular army. New Translation Road, which was rooted in the country, definitely needed the country's favor. Not only was the country's policy tilted, but even when the country formulated new policies in the future, they would also consult New Translation Road, a three-good company, for their opinions. Being able to participate in the formulation of national policies was more valuable than publishing 2 best-selling books for New Translation Road. With the support of the country's policies, cultural exports had become the general trend. Instead of not cooperating, New Translation Road might as well take the initiative. Anyway, the market was so big that it would be difficult to divide the cake no matter how it was divided. The most important point was that New Translation Road also controlled 2 other factors for success. It also controlled Tingsun literature, a killer weapon that provided a steady stream of resources. New Translation Road would definitely not be caught by other latecomers. Of course, Xing Yujie also said a reason that made Poplar Fruit overjoyed. Taking advantage of this opportunity, New Translation Road could really promote the model of dividing the translators. It could even set up an industry barrier to ensure that translators who contributed greatly could also get their own benefits. This was the importance of having the right to speak. Chapter 1503. The new translation path was progressing forward, and Yangguo would naturally receive more honor and status. But in fact, Poplar Fruit had received too many awards this year. For example, the Han Suin Youth Translation Award that those budding translators looked up to. Poplar Fruit, whose ability had long surpassed his peers, was too embarrassed to participate in such a competition. The more authoritative Gubaoquan Literary Translation Award, which was one of the two major literary translation awards in the country, had listed Poplar Fruit as a favorite since last year. Naturally, Poplar Fruit did not disappoint and won this award at the beginning of this year. And to his surprise, in November, there was news from abroad that the International Translation Federation had also announced that this year's Northern Lights Outstanding Literary Translation Award would be awarded to him. The Gubaoquan Literary Translation Award could not be compared to the Northern Lights Translation Award. The latter was established by the International Translation Federation, also known as the International Translation Federation. It was one of the highest awards in the international translation field. In addition, this award was only given out once every 3 years. Before this, no Chinese scholar had won this award. The reason why it was awarded to Poplar Fruit was not only because Poplar Fruit had translated works for 2 Nobel Prize winners in literature, but also because Poplar Fruit's translation of online novels had caused the Chinese Xuanhuan craze all over the world. More importantly, it was because of Poplar Fruit's academic achievements in the past 2 years. At this level, translation theory was not even presentable. Poplar Fruit's thesis, published by Harvard and Monterey's Language_Learning, at the end of last year, was a primer that brought Poplar Fruit to the attention of the International Translation Federation. It couldn't be helped. A theoretical thesis that could reduce the difficulty of learning Chinese was enough to cause a sensation in the academic world. And Poplar Fruit's latest thesis, published in the middle of this year, although it was not published in an authoritative foreign journal, it caused a sensation that foreign scholars could not ignore. If the previous articles were to be said to only reduce the difficulty of learning Chinese, then Yangguo's latest article was to break down the cultural barrier between Chinese and English from both sides. Not only were Chinese language scholars excited, but Western countries also began to pay close attention to it. Even those languages that were closely related to Chinese culture, such as Indonesian and Korean, also sought out Poplar Fruit's articles in an attempt to gain some inspiration from them. The International Translation Union realized that Poplar Fruit's contributions over the past 3 years were indeed worthy of awarding him a Northern Lights Award. The purpose of this award is to promote the development of literary translation, improve the quality of translations, and highlight the important role that translators play in promoting the close unity of people around the world. Wasn't that what Poplar Fruit had done? If he didn't win an award, there would be no justice. The news of Poplar Fruit winning an award caused quite a stir in the Chinese linguistics and translation circles. However, that was all. It was not the time for the award ceremony yet, and the media would not pay attention to such an unpopular award. But this news was enough to attract the attention of the Chinese Translation Association. After all, this award was much more important than the Gubaoquan Award. The Gubaoquan Award was only awarded because of Poplar Fruit's achievements a few years ago. His achievements in the past 2 years had not really been discussed by those big shots yet. It was not that Poplar Fruit was not good, but that Poplar Fruit was too young. It was also because of the issue of age that the International Translation Union took the lead in the Chinese Translation Association. Others had already given Poplar Fruit the highest award, so why were they still looking at the almanac from decades ago? Only then did the authorities realize that the young Poplar Fruit had quietly climbed to a peak that ordinary people could only look up to. The Northern Lights Award. Even some of the old scholars in the Translation Association could not help but be envious of it. But in the end, it was won by a young man. In comparison, they suddenly realized that their decades of experience were not as important as 2 theses written by a child. Should they give Poplar Fruit an award? For example, the China Translation Culture Lifetime Achievement Award. But this award was given to old translators. If a young man went up and won the Lifetime Achievement Award, how could the old translators hide their faces? Of course, there were also people who argued, there is no such thing in the award requirements. Who says that young people can't win awards? How can Poplar Fruit's achievements be worse than those of the previous winners? This person was none other than Poplar Fruit's old friend, Professor Rowling. Although this award had not been decided yet, and Poplar Fruit's qualifications were also very controversial, Poplar Fruit was still mentioned. Even if he did not win the award next year, perhaps the year after next or the year after next, he believed that one day Poplar Fruit would be able to use his better and better results to gain everyone's support. Outside of work, Poplar Fruit also accompanied Kiki to Beijing because Kiki's birthday was on November 11th. Using this opportunity, the 5 families except for Fong Beibei, who was pregnant and was forbidden from going anywhere by her parents, all gathered in Beijing. This was the first time they had reunited after a month of filming. The little fellows were having a great time. Because the production team had sent a photographer, the audience was lucky enough to see Nu Yi leading a little white horse, and Chi-Chi sitting on top of it with a smile on her face. In fact, more than a week ago, the 3rd season of Where Are We Going, Daddy? Had already finished airing. But the audience still felt that it was not enough. Especially the emotional last episode, it made the audience's emotions feel like they were on a roller coaster. First, it was the laughter and laughter of the children innocently interacting with the small animals. Then, it was the sadness brought by the off-key but pleasant farewell songs of the fathers before dinner. But after the sadness, it was the 3rd day. Suits, princess dresses and other luxurious outfits made the 5 family members show their faces one by one. Although every loving moment was a little torturous, poor single children, at the same time they could feel all kinds of immersive happiness. But the happiness and joy did not last long before it reached the final segment. The 5 families sat together and recalled every detail of their 8 trips. The constantly changing video footage and everyone's red eyes moved every audience member. But in the end they still said goodbye. And it was a goodbye that did not have the chance to start again. The audience was sad for a long time, and some female audience members even cried a few times. In the end, the production team did not forget to fan the flames by showing the photos of the children's reunion and gathering in Beijing. Oh my God, don't you know that after seeing these children for a week, actually a month, they have changed quite a bit. Dejun and Kong Kong have chipped their front teeth. Isn't this feeling very unbearable? Yes, the production team wanted everyone to go back and watch the show a few more times. When they parted, they had to do it forcefully because if they saw them again, it might be the last time. No, it should be said that if they met again in the future, these 5 adorable children might not be able to recognize them. Chapter 1504. Even though the outside world was paying attention to Poplar Fruit's life, Poplar Fruit had quietly made a name for himself in his field. In the future, Poplar Fruit, who was more focused on academics, teaching and public welfare, would be even more brilliant. However, at the end of November, all the glory, fame, media and fans' attention were cast aside. As for Poplar Fruit's work, he also took half a month off. All his energy was put into Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei's most important event in their lives. Finally, after half a year, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei finally welcomed their grand wedding. Song Jiwen was very helpful. He helped Poplar Fruit rent a resort in the suburbs of Yangcheng for 4 whole days. The cost was not much. The resort took into account Poplar Fruit's fame and only charged 200,000 yuan for the rental. There were many benefits to renting a resort. In addition to the wedding banquet, the resort also provided guests from afar, Poplar Fruit's relatives, students who worked in other cities, with luxurious hotel accommodations. All the guests could even enjoy the resort's hot spring service. In the cold winter, being able to soak in a hot spring was definitely the best thing to do. Of course, there was another benefit to the resort. It was spacious. It was not like the previous weddings where a large group of people were crowded in the hotel lobby. For the wedding, Poplar Fruit spent a lot of money. In addition to booking a resort, ordering a super luxurious wedding banquet, and hiring a professional wedding host team, etc. Poplar Fruit even hired a fleet of cars to pick up the guests at the airport, train station and other places. As for his wedding car, Poplar Fruit did not have to worry about it. Remember when he bought Lu Dongzhui's national husband from Poplar Fruit? Although Poplar Fruit didn't contact him often, their relationship wasn't bad. Perhaps young Master Wang's father, the richest man in the country, had reminded him of something. Although Poplar Fruit was not a businessman, Poplar Fruit's influence was not bad at all. In the entertainment industry, he could not be compared to an A-list celebrity. He had the additional influence from overseas. And his status in the academic world was unparalleled. He had even shown his face in front of the #1 leader. Such a low-key young talent that no one could ignore, young Master Wang, who had no conflict of interest, was naturally willing to befriend him. So when young Master Wang heard the news, he took the initiative to come to Poplar Fruit and drove 10 luxurious sports cars from his garage. BMW and Mercedes-Benz weren't even on the list. Lamborghini, Ferrari, Porsche, extended Lincoln and so on were standard. Among them there was an Aston Martin that was worth more than 40 million. Although this was not young Master Wang's best car, the entire fleet's market value had exceeded 100 million. At first, Poplar Fruit refused. The value of the fleet had frightened him and Fong Beibei. But young Master Wang kept persuading him, and what he said made sense. This was a once-in-a-lifetime wedding, so it had to be a grand one. The rich young Master Wang even patted his chest and said to Poplar Fruit, "Don't worry, the cars are all insured." He didn't say anything inauspicious, but what he meant was that Poplar Fruit could use it as he pleased. And even if the insurance company didn't pay, young Master Wang didn't care about this small amount of money. Poplar Fruit only needed to refuel himself, and if Poplar Fruit didn't have a driver, he could find someone to do it for free. Alright, Poplar Fruit was indeed persuaded by young Master Wang. So when such a long fleet of supercars appeared on the streets of Yangqing, the entire city was in an uproar. One had to know that because supercars couldn't run in the city, such luxurious cars were not commonly seen in Yangqing, a city with many rich people. What's more, they appeared in a group. If it weren't for the fleet's strict adherence to traffic regulations and the festive wedding stickers on the cars, the traffic police would probably have arrested them halfway. However, such a dazzling motorcade inevitably attracted the attention of the public, especially when it stopped at the traffic light. Weibo and WeChat moments were crazily flooded with these photos. Many people were guessing which big boss had organized this fleet of cars. But soon, paparazzi revealed that this fleet of cars was Poplar Fruit's bridal procession. Instantly, the number of people paying attention increased. People outside of Yangqing also clicked their tongues in wonder. Why did the paparazzi's information come so quickly? Because Poplar Fruit was still a hot topic in the news, and people's interest in his life had not subsided. Poplar Fruit's wedding had been anticipated by fans since a month ago, so the paparazzi had been asking around for information about Poplar Fruit's wedding arrangements. What made them ecstatic was that Poplar Fruit wasn't like other celebrities who arranged their weddings in beautiful foreign islands like Fiji or Bali. Instead, he chose a domestic venue where they could do whatever they wanted. In fact, after Poplar Fruit booked the resort, the paparazzi already knew about it. So for the past 2 days, it was as if they had been injected with chicken blood, surrounding the resort, because Zhuangzhou helped to find security inside. They couldn't get in, staring at every guest and identifying them. There was no need to mention the other 4 families whose fathers had gone. They had all arrived at the resort early in the morning. As the little host, Chi-Chi happily received her little friends. There were also many celebrities attending Poplar Fruit's wedding. Celebrities from the entertainment industry who were close to Poplar Fruit were all there, such as Teacher He's 5-man team, Mango TV's producer Xie and village chief Li Rue. The other members of the production team weren't famous. Sister Pomegranate and director Han Han, Che Injuan, Beast, Baiku and other unexpected creatives. Che Injuan was originally one of Poplar Fruit's groomsmen, and the other friends of Wan He Tianyi were technically supposed to call Poplar Fruit boss. What surprised everyone was that Beckham, who was far away in England, also came to Yangqing with his family. Of course, they didn't stay at the resort, but chose to stay at the hotel booked by the sponsor. Although they were also busy with some business matters, Beckham still smiled and told the reporters that his main purpose in coming to Yangqing was to attend his good friend Poplar Fruit's wedding. This news made the whole country boil with excitement. Even the Leon fever, Poplar Fruit's English name, which had cooled down in foreign countries, showed signs of rising again because of Beckham's revelation. Of course, in places where the media didn't notice, there were also VIPs from Givenchy quietly arriving in Yangqing. Artil, who had become the chief designer of Givenchy, and his granddaughter, Luo Danny, also came to attend their old friend Poplar Fruit's wedding. Chapter 1505. Of course, the reporters paid more attention to the big-name celebrities mentioned earlier. However, other than the celebrities, famous people from all walks of life also received their attention. It was a bit like a guessing game. They happily stayed at the entrance of the resort and examined every guest that came and went. They wanted to see if they could find more important people from Poplar Fruit's group of relatives and friends who were invited to the wedding banquet. The netizens also liked to watch. Their curiosity was very strong. In the end, they found out that there really were people. Most of them were from the academic world. For example, Luo Lin and the other professors who had appeared on TV through lecture room were easily recognized. Although they were a bit like has-been celebrities that no one cared about, don't underestimate the power of the paparazzi. As for the other important people who couldn't be recognized, for example, Dean Qishan of Beijing International University's College of Advanced Studies, Professor Yuan Xinlin of Beijing University, Professor Liu Shufeng of Shuimu University, etc. Although the outside world knew nothing about these people, they were well-known figures in the academic world. Needless to say, the professors from Higashiyama University in Yangqing didn't appear in public so early. Anyway, it was very close and they could rush over on the same day. The paparazzi posted the photos online and the students from their respective universities identified them. Suddenly, it caused a lot of exclamations. Everyone knew that Poplar Fruit was amazing, but how amazing was Poplar Fruit? It was difficult for outsiders to have an intuitive idea. However, seeing so many big names in the academic world come to support Poplar Fruit, everyone understood that Poplar Fruit was definitely not a nobody. Even the rising stars were not worthy of his fame. He was already a superstar. Otherwise, why would so many influential people come to Yangqing to attend his wedding banquet? Even if they were on good terms with him, these big names didn't need to lower themselves to please a junior. Therefore, the situation could only mean one thing. Either Poplar Fruit had a strong background or Poplar Fruit was really amazing. The former was obviously impossible. After years of digging by the media, the world knew what kind of background Poplar Fruit had. Moreover, Poplar Fruit's teacher was only the dean of Higashiyama University. Therefore, Poplar Fruit was really amazing. He was so amazing that many big names wanted to please him. Other than the academic world, people from the gaming world also came. There was no need to mention Uncle Tiger from Huishua. This guy wasn't famous. What really made everyone excited were the three big names from Blizzard from the United States. The usually low-key Alan, Mike and several other big bosses also appeared at the resort. They didn't have any relationship with Poplar Fruit. It was settled a few years ago. However, their friendship with Poplar Fruit had been maintained. However, when it came to Hearthstone, which had become Blizzard's flagship game, they should also show respect and gratitude to Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei who accidentally created it. Therefore, the appearance of Alan, Mike and the others made the domestic Blizzard fans excited. At this time, they remembered that the Hearthstone that they played every day after dinner was the work of a Chinese couple. Of course, they should be called husband and wife now. Now, after several years, Hearthstone was finally at the peak of its development. There were all kinds of leagues and its creators had ended their love run and started to write their own happy lives. Time were all old. Some forum moderators introduced it in such a sentimental way. Many fans were moved to tears. Well, let's not talk about that. Apart from the big names that everyone paid attention to, there were also many people that the paparazzi didn't notice or didn't even appear in their field of vision. For example, people from the political world kept a low profile. For example, the county magistrate from Poplar Fruit's hometown, Chen Longjiang, who was already working in Guishan province but had a deep personal relationship with Poplar Fruit. Thanks to Poplar Fruit, he was already sitting on the mayor's throne. Uncle Jean from Guangdong province's education department and so on. There were also people from the military world such as Jing Zhui, Meng Sanhua, Yang Jingdong, the Xiong brothers and so on. They were all present. However, these people from the military and political world knew that Poplar Fruit's wedding banquet was bound to be watched. Therefore, those who came from other places chose to stay outside. In the end, they sat in the car sent by Poplar Fruit and went directly to the wedding banquet. Moreover, they didn't sit in the main hall. Poplar Fruit chose a few luxurious rooms to entertain them. As for those with higher ranks such as the director of the public security department, Yan Wanxiong or Zheng Yuji's father, of course they wouldn't come. However, they all called Poplar Fruit to congratulate him. Zheng Mingxing's attitude towards Poplar Fruit had always been a bit strange. He wasn't like Zheng Yuji's mother who had always been hostile towards Poplar Fruit. Instead, he admired Poplar Fruit and had always respected Poplar Fruit's academic achievements. Of course, he didn't give Poplar Fruit any help. He watched Poplar Fruit's growth from an outsider's perspective. He always felt that it was very interesting. However, it was undeniable that because of the mysterious relationship between Poplar Fruit and Jing Yujie, Zheng Mingxing wouldn't be nice to Poplar Fruit. After all, although Poplar Fruit was a good man, he had delayed his daughter's youth and put Jing Yujie in a position to fight against the family. However, Poplar Fruit didn't appreciate it. If it weren't for Zheng Mingxing's admiration for Poplar Fruit would have died a terrible death. Therefore, it was precisely because of this strange attitude that Zheng Mingxing suddenly called to congratulate Poplar Fruit. This made Poplar Fruit feel flattered and nervous for a long time. It couldn't be helped. Not long ago, the daughter of a provincial party secretary almost became his mistress. How could Poplar Fruit not panic? In addition to these famous people, the rest were relatives, classmates and friends of Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. They were the main force among the guests. These days, the resort village was filled with their laughter. However, why would the paparazzi care about these ordinary people who weren't famous? Just as they gradually couldn't find any interesting new discoveries, a bus slowly drove over. The children who got off the bus with pairs of bright and curious eyes made them cheer again. It was the children from Xiong family village. Although they couldn't recognize them, they could guess that they were the children from the mountain areas that Poplar Fruit did charity. Sister Xiaolin, Brother Xiaofeng, Brother Anchen. Kiki cheered and welcomed them happily with Nuo Yi and a few of her friends. In the middle of the team was Luo Danny, the little princess of France. The little girl was overjoyed. During this time it was like a festival for her. Many of her friends came to play with her. Let me introduce you all. You are all my good friends. Under Kiki's introduction, the children who didn't have the distinction of rich and poor quickly integrated. Chapter 1506. Vroom vroom vroom. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, an Aston Martin motorcade drove over in a flashy manner. The colorful and dazzling cars almost blinded everyone's eyes. Of course, it was also because the roads in the Shainan district of Yongqing were too narrow that the motorcade drove very slowly, giving the crowd the opportunity to stop and watch. The unique roar of the sports car's exhaust pipe was almost like a symphony of bass bubbles. This kind of sound, in the ears of car lovers, wasn't inferior to the classical music performed by a top international orchestra. However, this was actually used by Yonghua and the others to replace the firecrackers that were commonly seen in wedding cars. Yongqing didn't allow firecrackers and fireworks. Moreover, no one would dare to set off firecrackers in a sports car that was worth millions or even tens of millions. Therefore, the quick-witted Prince Wang came up with this idea. Whether it looked like it or not, it was very flashy. He summoned all the people in the small town. "Wife, come out and see God." The effect was no less than what Wu Mingda had said in the Moonlight Cache. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the car stopped on a road. The drivers naturally stayed in the car. A few people carrying large cameras ran out of the 3 convertible sports cars. They were professional cameramen who had been borrowed from Mango TV to help with the program. Of course, Poplar Fruit still paid for it. However, it was also because Poplar Fruit had a good relationship with Mango TV and the basic staff of the program. Otherwise, even if he had the money, he wouldn't have been able to borrow them. As if rehearsed, the doors of the 5 cars behind opened at the same time with a click. 5 groomsmen in black suits walked out. Look at their exquisite high-end suits and shiny hair. They all had different hairstyles. Even without looking at their faces, one would think that they were all more handsome than the other. Of the 5 groomsmen, the one in the lead was of course Yonggua's lifelong best friend, Song Jiwen. I don't know if there's a custom where groomsmen can only be unmarried, but I'll just pretend there isn't. He was the main groomsman and he even had Yonggua's wedding ring in his pocket. The second one was young Master Wang, who had joined in the fun with a sneaky smile. Young Master Wang had attended many celebrity weddings this year. Although he liked to flaunt his wealth in the past few years, he had been working hard to improve his image and expand his network. Of course, he didn't threaten Poplar Fruit to provide him with the opportunity to be the best man. However, since he proposed it, Poplar Fruit agreed. It was not a big deal. Moreover, Child Wang's personality was not bad and he got along well with Poplar Fruit. However, he didn't know if the reporters would reveal that young Master Wang had taken the time out of his busy schedule to be Poplar Fruit's groomsman. Would that become the topic of gossip again? That was a story for another time. Young Master Wang wasn't the main point. He was just a bystander. Let's look at the groomsmen behind him. The third one was Chaiyan Juan. This was not surprising. Although Chae-in-juan was a celebrity, he had always had a good relationship with Poplar Fruit. Naturally, he would not be absent from this important event in Poplar Fruit's life. The fourth one was a little too big. Fat Dragon. This guy's company was not doing well. Other than a few best-selling games, it had been declining for the past 2 years. However, the money they earned was still enough for them to spend. These guys did not have much need for money. Instead, they focused on their skills, so they didn't care. However, as Poplar Fruit's best friend when he was young, and as a relative and brother when he grew up, Fat Dragon was definitely qualified to be Poplar Fruit's best man. As for the fifth person, it was no surprise that it was Wang Yuba. Although Wang Yuba still called Poplar Fruit his teacher in school after he started working, he was a good helper to Poplar Fruit. He and Lin Xingshan managed the charity fund very well. Of course, as Fang Beibei's best friend, Lin Xingshan was definitely going to be the bridesmaid. Her partner, Wang Yuba, was naturally going to be the best man. Naturally, it was very interesting. As the fifth best man, Wang Yuba's relationship with Poplar Fruit was not the furthest. In fact, the order of the best men had nothing to do with their relationship. Song Jiwen wanted to get the wedding ring, so he stood first without a doubt. Wang Yuba was the youngest, so naturally he was the last best man who often had to run errands and do this and that. The best man's appearance was still not bad. Except for Fat Dragon, the other four were considered handsome. Song Jiwen was already very handsome. In terms of appearance, Poplar Fruit was a little worse than him. Needless to say, Chae-in-juan had an evil charm with his aquiline nose. Wang Yuba was not bad either. He was still the most handsome in the past. Therefore, the appearance of the 5 best men gave a great visual impact to the onlookers. Then, when they welcomed the groom in the white suit from the second Lincoln limousine, all eyes were attracted to him. There was a beautiful man in the Southern Kingdom. His appearance was as beautiful as a fairy. His clothes were whiter than snow. He was elegant and handsome. White clothes were not something that ordinary people could wear. But who was Poplar Fruit? 3 years ago, he was a new model who dominated the Bali Fashion Week. Today, Poplar Fruit, in addition to his handsome figure, also had a calm and elegant temperament. He was wearing a white suit. Not only did no one feel that it was out of place, but the golden dragon embroidery on the sleeves made him look like a noble gentleman. No wonder the girls and aunties in the small town were stunned. Although Poplar Fruit, who always refused to put on makeup, was still barefaced today, people were in high spirits. The groom was also jubilant today. He smiled until his face was flushed. It was like the peach blossoms on each other's faces. Of course, the good things had just begun. Surrounded by the 5 best men in black suits, Poplar Fruit smiled as he took a big bouquet of flowers from the Aston Martin in front of him. The 99 roses were so big that Poplar Fruit had to hold them with both hands. Wrapped in pink lace, the outer layer was a bright sky full of stars. In the middle, there were 99 red roses in the shape of a heart, bright as fire. There were also some contrasting white roses in the middle. The white roses formed the word "I love you." Of course, the word "love" was a small heart shape. Child Wang took out a big stack of red envelopes from his pocket that Poplar Fruit had prepared. It seemed to be suitable for him to keep them. The red envelopes were long strips of red envelopes that were a little bigger than 100 yuan when spread out. Each one was stuffed to the brim. It looked very visually shocking. The function of the red envelopes was needless to say. They were the bridesmaids who firmly protected or detained the bride in the palm of their hands. They were the bridesmaids who needed to break through the key points and successfully rescue the bride. Seeing that everyone was ready, Poplar Fruit waved happily. "Brothers, let's go." It was time to pick up the bride. Chapter 1507. Fang Beibei's house was in the alley behind the shop on the street. The car couldn't drive in, so Poplar Fruit walked into the alley, surrounded by a group of groomsmen. At this time, the small alley was already crowded. Fang Beibei's neighbors came out to join in the fun. Of course, there were also some Fang Beibei's relatives. They stayed behind to support Fang Beibei. Later, besides the bridesmaids and groomsmen, Fang Beibei's parents would sit in the bridal escort team. The others would sit in the reception team behind or drive their own cars to the wedding banquet together. Because it was overcrowded, Poplar Fruit and the others cupped their hands and smiled along the way, passing through the middle of the crowd. These onlooking neighbors didn't have a big red packet, but Poplar Fruit wasn't so stingy. The little brothers who followed him ran in front and back, carrying baskets full of small red packets and giving them out one by one. The money was not much. It was just a small red packet of 10 yuan. It was only enough to buy 2 bottles of water at the moment. However, it was still a token of the groom's appreciation. Everyone accepted it with satisfaction. They smiled and congratulated. Congratulations, congratulations. Under the care of the onlooking neighbors, they deliberately made a path for Poplar Fruit and the others to pass through the crowded alley neatly. But the real test had just begun. The door of the courtyard below was closed. But they could hear that Fong Bei's nieces and nephews were laughing non-stop. Quick, pick up the bride. Song Jiwen ran over and knocked on the door as a pawn. Do you think you can pick up the bride just because you say so? Who knows if you are impersonating? What if you pick up the wrong person? Everyone was sweating when they heard this. How could there be impersonators in the bridal escort team? This wasn't a period drama where the wrong bridal sedan chair was married to the right man. Moreover, the girl who shouted, Chin Anlin, is it appropriate for you to argue with your husband like this? Then what do you suggest we do? Song Jiwen laughed. He also heard his wife's voice. However, Chin Anlin was originally the bridesmaid of Fong Bei. This restless little pepper had slipped down. What should we do? Sisters, what do you think we should do? Chin Anlin seemed to be instigating the atmosphere among Fong Bei's female relatives. He heard the giggles of a large group of Orioles and then shouted in unison, of course we have to show our appreciation. Fortunately we were prepared. Poplar Fruit smiled and waved his hand. There was no need for Poplar Fruit to do it himself. The tall and strong Che Injuan took out 2 large stacks of red envelopes from the 2 inner pockets of his suit. They were slightly smaller than the ones in Child Wang's hands. But the amount was not small. There were 200 renminbi in 1 red packet. Che Injuan did not hesitate. He stuffed about 20 stacks of red packets through the lock on the big iron door. Song Jiwen shouted, count them. Is it enough to share? If it's not enough, we have more. He. It was a mess inside. It seemed like they were snatching red packets. However, Chin Anlin did not participate. She was there to cause trouble. She shouted, not enough, not enough. Not enough, we have more. Song Jiwen took another stack from Fat Dragon and stuffed it in. However, at this time there was gradually no sound. Hey, can you say something? Song Jiwen asked in confusion. There was no movement. There was only the sound of whispers. Fortunately, before the groom and groomsmen could get impatient, the door was unlocked. Then with a creak, it was pulled open by 2 young girls who were covering their mouths and laughing. The Fong family's courtyard was not big and they planted flowers. Usually only Father Fong's car could be parked, and Poplar Fruit's car could only be parked outside. But later, Poplar Fruit paid for his parents-in-law to buy the nearby land and refurbish it. Now the courtyard looked very spacious. However, it was still full of people. They were all Fong Bei's relatives and most of them were the younger generation who had come to watch the show. They were laughing and sizing up Poplar Fruit and the others who had just entered. Especially the cameramen who were carrying cameras. They were all curiously stared at by the children. With so many people, Poplar Fruit's red packet was actually not enough. However, just now it was Chin Anlin who made things difficult for Poplar Fruit and the others. The Fong family's relatives were very satisfied with this son-in-law. Hello, auntie, little sister. Poplar Fruit greeted the relatives on both sides. Although they were not familiar with each other, after all, they were a family. Poplar Fruit had done a lot of studying. Alright, don't waste your time here with us. An auntie who was more important in the Fong family laughed and said, come in quickly. Your parents-in-law are waiting for you. Poplar Fruit quickly nodded and gestured to her, then walked straight to the door of the house. The 5 groomsmen behind him slowed down and stood slightly outside the door like door gods. Poplar Fruit had to face it alone. Poplar Fruit did not hesitate and gently pushed the door open. Originally, the living room had a sofa and a coffee table as usual. However, at this moment the original furniture had been pushed to the side. Facing the door, there was an antique square table and 2 old-fashioned armchairs. Father Fong, who was wearing a red tang suit, and Mother Fong, who was wearing a cheongsam, were sitting in front. This was the wish of the elderly. As Poplar Fruit and Fong Bei were more inclined to have a Western wedding, while the elderly were more traditional, they still followed Chinese customs when picking up the bride. Poplar Fruit walked in and knelt down respectfully. He kowtowed to his parents-in-law and said, "Dad, Mom, I'm here to pick up Bebe." Some people would say, "What era is it now? Why are you kowtowing to others?" But in reality, kowtowing did not mean that you were groveling and servile. Kowtowing also represented gratitude and respect. This was the custom here, and Poplar Fruit was willing to kowtow. After all, he was taking away the daughter that they had raised for more than 20 years. Poplar Fruit, who was also his father, understood how it felt. But Mr. and Mrs. Fong did not want to torture Poplar Fruit like before. They were polite, so they quickly let Poplar Fruit stand up. Mr. Fong asked Poplar Fruit to stand beside him and gently patted his hand. "Poplar Fruit, I'm very happy that you called me Dad," Mr. Fong said with a smile on his face. "Because actually I'm very relieved to hand my daughter over to you. When you first came here, your mom..." He pointed to Mrs. Fong, who was next to him with tears in her eyes, and said, "She was impatient and did not let you in. She even made you stand outside for a day and a night." Poplar Fruit quickly said, "It's okay, Dad. Let's not talk about this anymore." He was mainly afraid that the elderly would feel awkward. After all, Mr. and Mrs. Fong were very cruel at that time and left Poplar Fruit outside. They even almost broke up the couple. "I'm going home tonight." Fortunately, Xiao Han finished writing the ending of the novel last night. He will probably finish the novel on the first day of the Lunar New Year. In order to make everyone happy, I will release the ending on the first day of the Lunar New Year. Finally, I hope everyone will recommend and vote for me. Chapter 1508. It's okay to talk about it. Father Fong patted the back of Poplar Fruit's hand and smiled. "I know you don't blame us. At that time you stood outside for an entire night. Bei also cried in her room for an entire night." Father Fong sighed. "At that time we felt that you really loved my daughter. The only regret was your identity back then, right? There was a knot in your heart that you couldn't let go of." Poplar Fruit nodded. He could understand how Father Fong felt. If it were him, Poplar Fruit wouldn't be willing to let Kiki be someone else's stepmother. "We didn't care about your reputation or your money. We just hoped that my daughter could find a man who truly loved her and cared for her," Father Fong said. "Back then we tested and criticized you for this purpose. Bei is very straightforward and naive. Sometimes she's very stubborn. Although she doesn't have any bad intentions, when she's stubborn, it's hard to tolerate her," Father Fong said. "I know that you always gave in to her and protected her when we quarreled at home. We all know how hard you've worked for the past few years." Actually, Poplar Fruit and Fong Bei didn't quarrel much. The two of them loved each other like an old married couple. But just like what Father Fong said, when they really quarreled, Fong Bei's temper wasn't small. The two of them almost broke down from their quarrel. But because they cared about each other, they reconciled in the end. Now that the two of you are going to be a real family, you have to continue living well. Life is a matter between the two of you. Communicate more about the big and small matters. If she's in the wrong, you tell her directly. When she's stubborn, you give in to her. After that, you can slowly communicate with her. She'll understand on her own." Father Fong rambled on as if he had a lot to say. In fact, this was just another way that parents couldn't bear to part with their daughter when it was time to marry her off. This kind of sincere emotion was deep in his heart, and it was also revealed in his every word and every action. Fong Bei's mother had been crying for a long time. Although the wedding was just a ceremony, marrying off a daughter in modern times did not mean a permanent separation. On the contrary, because they lived close to each other, Fong Bei could come home often. However, only parents would be able to understand this kind of mixed feelings. "Dad, Mom, don't worry, I will always be good to Bei." Poplar Fruit's eyes were a little red. He said loudly. Good. With your words, we can rest assured that you will take care of our daughter." Mr. Fong felt a lump in his throat. He patted Poplar Fruit's hand and pointed upstairs. "Go." Father Fong choked on his sobs and couldn't say anything else. Poplar Fruit bowed deeply to the two old men and then began to walk upstairs. Outside the door, Song Jiwen and the other groomsmen quickly followed. They didn't take off their shoes. They didn't need to take off their shoes today. The first floor was over and the second floor was full of fun. Fong Bei had already put on her makeup and a custom-made wedding dress in the bedroom. However, Poplar Fruit, who was in a hurry, couldn't see her, because she had been detained in the bedroom by Qin Anlin, Lin Xingshan and the other bridesmaids. Kiki, Nu Yi, Nina and Xian Xian, the 4 flower girls, were also hiding in the bedroom, giggling. Fang Beibei's bridesmaids were also her best friends, Qin Anlin, Lin Xingshan, Lu Lei and Lu Ruhua. The 5th bridesmaid was Fang Beibei's best friend from university, a girl named Wang Yiru. Wang Yiru had gone to America to study in university, and now she was developing her career in America. However, this time because of Fang Beibei's wedding she came all the way back from America. However, Wang Yiru wasn't gentle. She was also a carefree girl and quickly got along well with everyone. At this time she also shamelessly stuck her head out from the crack of the door and giggled. "Brother-in-law, hurry up and give me the red packet." Behind her she couldn't stop giggling. Even Lin Xingshan, who usually spoke softly, shouted loudly, "If you don't give us the red packet, then leave the bride to us to be the wife of the fort." After saying that, they laughed and played together again. In the room, Fang Beibei sat on the bed and giggled. She looked at her 5 best friends, and the 4 little ones who didn't want to be left out mingled together. Although she really wanted to see Poplar Fruit, and also hoped that Poplar Fruit could see her beautiful appearance, she didn't have the slightest intention of helping her husband solve his problems because of the extortion of her sisters. She was now pregnant. Actually, it was only slightly more than 2 months, and it was just a little obvious. She should just sit back and watch the show calmly. "Wait, don't be so quick to use the real thing." Song Jiwen quickly stopped Child Wang. He had experienced it once before, so he was very experienced. The few of them took out a stack of red packets from Fat Dragon that they didn't give out at the door. Poplar Fruit took it and stuffed it through the crack of the door. He smiled and said, "Here are the red packets. Let us in to pick up the bride." However, after receiving the red packets, they locked the door first and then shouted loudly, "Hurry, hurry up, sisters, open the red packets quickly. I want one too, I want one too." Kiki and the other little ones also shouted. "Hey, can you guys keep a low profile? We're still outside. We can hear you." Song Jiwen knocked on the door and shouted. "We like it, what can you do?" Qin Anlin didn't give her husband any face at all. "Why are there so few?" Seeing that there were only a few red packets in the red packets, the bridesmaids were dissatisfied and shouted, "So stingy. Don't open it, don't open it. How dare you fool us? Poplar Fruit, don't take out the big red packets. Don't even think about getting married today." Under their instigation, the little ones also jumped and shouted, "Big red packets, big red packets." Poplar Fruit took the big red packets from Child Wang this time, and stuffed them in one after another. "How much is it this time? Open it." After opening the red packets, they screamed happily, "Wow, there's so much. How much money is there?" 1, 2, 3, 38, 39. 39 meant forever. "We're rich." There was laughter inside again. "Sisters, can you open the door?" Poplar Fruit asked helplessly. However, at this time, Kiki seemed to have turned into a scammer. She said, But we haven't." 5 big red packets were stuffed in, enough for the 5 bridesmaids, but the little ones didn't get any. "Why do little kids need red packets?" Song Jiwen laughed. "What little kids?" Qin Anlin said unhappily. "Yes, that's right, everyone here is one of us." Lu Ruhua shouted loudly, "Hurry up and give us the red packets, give us the big red packets, we still have 4 little friends." Chapter 1509. Hee 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 hee. Kiki had completely betrayed her dearest father and joined a group of bandit aunties. She led her friends in an uprising. "We want red packets, big red packets." Thank goodness they were prepared. Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth and sighed. He waved his hand and took the last stack of red packets from Child Wang. He said in a pleading tone, "This should be enough, right? I don't have any more." They had the money, but they did not have enough red packets. How could they stuff an endless amount of red packets into their pockets? Qin Anlin smiled proudly and distributed the red packets to the cheerful flower girls. He said, "That's enough. I look at how scared you are. We're not bandits." "That's not what you said when you asked for red packets." "Then open the door quickly." Song Jiwen shouted. Young Master Wang stood at the back. Today was an eye-opener for him. In the past, when he attended weddings, he only saw polite people or businessmen who pretended to be cultured. When had he ever seen someone make things difficult for the groom? Therefore, as a spectator, he did not say anything and just watched happily. It's not that simple. Qin Anlin turned into a demon king this time. He led the bridesmaids to stop the groom and the best man from attacking. You took the red packets. What's wrong? Song Jiwen shouted. Why are you in such a hurry? Are you the groom or is Poplar Fruit the groom? Go away. Little Pepper was still unforgiving even though she was married. She shouted fiercely, Poplar Fruit is not in a hurry. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to do it himself. He walked up and smiled. All right, Anlin. What do you need? Just tell me. Two murmurs could be heard from inside. Soon the discussion was over. Qin Anlin's voice came again. You gave the red packets. Material gratitude is not bad, but what about the spirit? Why don't I see any gratitude from you? In terms of material things, how could he be grateful? This was clearly asking for a bribe. Poplar Fruit shook his head and asked, All right, what do you want? Tell me. As soon as he said that, Wang Yiru shouted impatiently, Sing for us. However, her mouth was immediately covered. It seemed that the bridesmaids did not expect Wang Yiru to make such a request. What's wrong? Child Wang asked in a low voice as he looked at Song Jiwen and the others who had suddenly become flustered. Fat Dragon turned his head expressionlessly, looking like he had nothing left to live for. He stretched out his two big hands, covered his ears and whispered, Later you'd better cover your ears too. When Poplar Fruit heard this, he glared at them in annoyance. He felt that his singing was not so bad that everyone had to cover their ears. He turned around and asked, Then what do you want me to sing? Wang Yiru wiped away the cold sweat on her forehead. Only now did she realize that other people needed money to sing, but Poplar Fruit's singing was life-threatening. Of course there were also a lot of exaggerations, but the words spoken were like water spilled out and it was too late for regrets. The bridesmaids could only let Wang Yiru continue to be willful. Just sing Sister Na's Conquer. Wang Yiru thought for a moment then added, Just sing the two classic lines. Poplar Fruit understood what the other party meant. He thought for a moment then opened his mouth and sang, Conquered by you just like that, cut off all my escape routes, my heart is firm, my decision is wise. Poplar Fruit changed the lyrics himself. Conquered by you just like that, turned into a stupid pig for you, my heart is clear, my love is captive to you. Although it was improvised, Poplar Fruit's lyrics were very affectionate. Therefore, even though Poplar Fruit's singing was not good, the bridesmaids still shouted in envy. So amazing. So talented. Baby, you're so lucky. Ahem, can we open the door now? Poplar Fruit asked. Oh no. How could they be satisfied so quickly? The bridesmaids shouted again, You only sang for Bebe, you haven't sung for us yet. Then what should we sing? Poplar Fruit scratched his head and asked. No matter what you sing, just make us laugh. This voice was Lu Ruhua's and she laughed. Yanggua's eyes lit up. He got some inspiration from Lu Ruhua's voice. Immediately he opened his mouth and said, I'm Lao Ji, I'm from the village, I'm a local sheep. Pfft. Suddenly everyone laughed. Even the cameraman almost couldn't hold his camera. No one thought that Poplar Fruit would do such a thing. This song, or the Hong Kong version of Ton Air, started from a comedy movie, Charlotte's Trouble. Later, in order to promote his new movie, Andy Lau actually sang this song. Poplar Fruit's Mandarin was super standard, but it didn't mean that he couldn't imitate the Hong Kong accent. These few verses he sang really well. Child Wang laughed so hard that he had to support himself against the wall to stand still. He was very familiar with this song. The movie that was popular in China in the middle of the year was produced by Wanda. Inside, the northeastern Lu Ruhua was also laughing hard. "Oh, Poplar Fruit, you're so funny." This Hong Kong joke, he really didn't get tired of it even after playing it for a year. "Is this okay?" Yanghua asked anxiously. He had already tried so hard to sing, so shamelessly imitating the Hong Kong people. Could it be that the difficulty of picking up the bride was going to continue endlessly? Ahem. The eldest sister Qin Anlin calmed down first. She coughed lightly and said, "Open the door." The door to the bride's bedroom was opened, and the first thing they saw were the 5 beautiful bridesmaids dressed in the same light pink gowns. Of course, there were also the little ones in the middle who kept blinking their curious eyes. "Daddy!" Chi-Chi ran over happily as if she wasn't the one who had tricked her father just now. "Hee hee." Poplar Fruit patted his daughter, who was also very beautiful in the princess dress. He naturally wouldn't argue with the little girl, but today's main character wasn't Kiki. Wait a moment. Qin Anlin led the 5 bridesmaids to the door and said, "We have something to say." As if rehearsed, they said one sentence after another. "Although you passed our test, you will also successfully pick up the bride. But you have to remember, always be good to our baby. You can't relax your expectations of yourself after marrying her home. We will always be watching you." They said it very smoothly, and it felt quite funny to hear them say one sentence after another. Poplar Fruit didn't dare to laugh. He nodded and said, Of course. Finally, after going through a lot of hardships, Poplar Fruit finally walked in. With just a slight turn, he saw his bride smiling shyly under the beautiful wedding dress. After talking so much about the design of the wedding dress, Poplar Fruit was looking at the person wearing the wedding dress. He looked at her in a daze, and the love in his eyes was about to overflow. This was the woman who was going to grow old with him hand in hand. What's wrong? Are you stunned? Qin Anlin was very satisfied with Poplar Fruit's performance. After all, the women spent a lot of time picking out the designer's samples. Then, the designer from Givenchy helped to measure the data. Took a long time. At this time, Yonghua came back to his senses. He smiled, walked up, stretched out a hand and gently pulled Fong Beibei up from the bed. Fong Beibei was already wearing high heels, but there was still a gap between her and Poplar Fruit's height. Poplar Fruit gently held Fong Beibei's face, and gently stroked it as if there was no one else around. His eyes were full of love, and he smiled and said, "Baby, you're so beautiful today." Under the lead of the Shy Nui, the little guys began to cover their faces and scream. Fong Beibei's breath smelled really good, and her bright skin and pink lips with a little lip gloss were like a painting. Poplar Fruit couldn't help but kiss her like the little guys said. "Before the wedding we can't kiss the bride, right?" Lin Xingshan asked weakly. "That's right." Poplar Fruit laughed and then let go of Fong Beibei's face. He turned around and gently held Fong Beibei's gloved hand. Let's go. Poplar Fruit was full of heroism, and he waved his hand and said. The wedding procession set off again. Poplar Fruit, Fong Beibei, Kiki no I and Xianxian Nina sat in the second most spacious Lincoln limousine. The value of the Lincoln was definitely not comparable to the first Aston Martin, but how could a sports car fit so many people? And relatively speaking, the Lincoln limousine was more suitable for the bride and groom. The other 5 pairs of groomsmen and bridesmaids also sat in the car behind in pairs. The fleet of luxury cars, the fleet of cars behind them, and the cars driven by their friends and relatives, totaled up to more than 20 cars. Fortunately, they had avoided the rush hour. Otherwise, they would have been stuck on the road. Luckily, once they got on the highway, they could have a smooth journey. At the wedding venue of the resort, there were many chairs set up on the lush grass. These were the seats for the relatives and friends who had witnessed the wedding. Just like the Western-style weddings that people often saw in movies and TV shows, there would be a priest who would help preside over the ceremony, and then the wedding banquet would be held indoors. There was no church here, and Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei also preferred to hold their wedding outdoors, so they moved to the lush grass. The weather was sunny today and the sky was blue. The sun also warmed the air, making it very suitable for holding an event outside. Chapter 15:11. Dang 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 dang. As the tune rang out, everyone turned their heads around. Under the threatening gazes of the adults, the restless children secretly whispered to their companions, "The bride is here, the bride is here." On the main stage, Poplar Fruit was already standing to the right of the priest, while the groomsmen and bridesmaids were neatly divided into 2 sides. Below the stage, the immediate family members of the 2 families were also seated in front. According to the rules of a Western wedding, the newlyweds had to attend separately. Poplar Fruit came out behind the priest invited by the Sacred Heart Church, while Fong Beibei slowly got out of the car after the music started. Fong Beibei's father was already waiting outside the arched door. Fong Beibei held onto his arm, smiling faintly as she followed her father along the red carpet to the main stage. Xianxian and Nina walked in front with flowers in their hands, while Nui and Kiki walked behind with Fong Beibei's long wedding dress in their hands. After all, Fong Beibei's father was a graduate of Shuimu University, so his compatibility with Western culture was much better than many of the older generation. He had never practiced this step before, but after listening to the explanation once he walked quite well. If it were Poplar Fruit's father, Yang Tai, who had been a farmer all his life, he would probably be confused by these complicated rules. So beautiful! The audience exclaimed. There were also some relatives from Poplar Fruit's village who didn't understand the dialect, but they also praised sincerely. Brother Guo's wife is really beautiful, just like a fairy. At this moment Fong Beibei really looked like a fairy from the heavens stepping on white clouds. She was graceful and her steps were graceful. She was so beautiful that one could not look straight at her. In fact, Fong Beibei usually didn't walk like this, but today she was wearing a pair of nearly 10 centimeters high heels, so it was a little difficult for her to walk. On one hand she had to walk steadily and on the other hand she had to raise her head and straighten her chest to maintain a natural expression. For this reason Fong Beibei practiced for a few days. As she walked, she became slower and more elegant. Poplar Fruit had some complaints about this, because it was not suitable for pregnant women to wear high heels. On one hand it was unsafe and on the other hand, it would increase the burden on the waist and abdomen. However, one should never underestimate a woman's pursuit of beauty. Even the mild-mannered Fong Beibei was being stubborn for once. Today was her big day, the most important moment of her life. She wanted to appear in front of everyone in her most beautiful state. Especially in front of Poplar Fruit. Therefore Poplar Fruit had no choice but to agree. Poplar Fruit was on tenterhooks as he watched Fong Beibei slowly walk over. Fortunately, Fong Beibei's father was by her side. Fong Beibei walked a little slower but very steadily. Finally, under the envious gazes of their relatives and friends, Fong Beibei's father sent Fong Beibei to Poplar Fruit's side before retreating to the first row below the stage and sitting down. The music stopped and the atmosphere gradually became solemn. This was because there were no small programs interspersed here. The most important step of the wedding was about to begin. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei faced each other, smiling sweetly at each other. The priest stood between them a little behind, holding a Bible and was ready to begin his vows. Now, the two newlyweds, please place your right hand over your heart and answer God's question. Although the priest was invited by the Sacred Heart Church, he was also Chinese, so he conducted the ceremony in Chinese. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei both placed their right hand over their hearts and felt their own heartbeats. Their heartbeats were slightly faster and that was a little excitement of happiness. Bridegroom Mr. Poplar Fruit, today in the form of marriage, you accept Miss Fong Beibei as your legal wife. From now on, in health and in sickness, in wealth and in poverty, are you willing to love her, respect her, protect her and be with her for the rest of your life? Was there a need to hesitate? Poplar Fruit said firmly, I do. Then Fong Beibei received the same question. She looked at Poplar Fruit with a smile and said sweetly without hesitation, I do. The audience applauded, but it was not the next segment yet. The priest said calmly, Poplar Fruit, Fong Beibei, now please hold each other's hands. As husband and wife, please swear to each other. Poplar Fruit, please tell me. Poplar Fruit nodded and said, I, Poplar Fruit, marry you as my wife with all my heart. No matter if you are in good times or bad, rich or poor, in health or in sickness, happy or sad, I will love you without reservation. I will try my best to understand you and trust you completely. We will become a whole, a part of each other. We will face everything in life together, share our dreams and spend the rest of our lives as equal and faithful partners. Fong Beibei was the same. I, Fong Beibei, marry you with all my heart. The oath was a little long. She was not as good as Poplar Fruit to recite it accurately, but Fong Beibei had already memorized it. Finally the oath was over and the priest smiled. He announced, now is the ceremony of exchanging rings. Rings are a symbol of marriage. Their perfect rings represent life and love, symbolizing eternal love. Poplar Fruit, please put the ring on the bride's hand. Behind him, Song Jiwen opened the small box that he had been holding in his hand for a long time and stretched it in front of Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit took out their wedding rings. The wedding rings were different from the diamond rings they had worn when they proposed. This one was platinum and inlaid with diamonds. The diamonds inlaid were slightly smaller, mainly because they would usually wear them on their hands. The custom-made wedding ring from Tiffany was more like a simple ring than a crafty one. If one did not look carefully, one would not be able to tell that the retro patterns on it were actually their Chinese names. Poplar Fruit was serious, as if he was taking care of a priceless antique. He gently held Fong Beibei's raised left hand, and then put the wedding ring on her ring finger. At that moment, Poplar Fruit's heart was surging, as if he had been looking forward to it for a lifetime. The smile and happiness on his face could not help but overflow. Fong Beibei, please put the ring on the groom's hand. The priest looked kindly at Fong Beibei. Fong Beibei also took the groom's wedding ring from the first bridesmaid, Lin Xingshan, and gently put it on Poplar Fruit's left ring finger. The only difference between the groom's and the bride's wedding rings was the diamonds on them. The groom's ring had 4 small blue diamonds, while the bride's ring had 4 small pink diamonds. These pure-colored diamonds made the value of the 2 wedding rings add up to nearly 1,000,000 yuan. After exchanging the rings, the priest smiled and nodded slightly. He said, "Poplar Fruit, you can kiss your bride now." Bang bang. The ribbons fluttered and the music started. Poplar Fruit smiled and welcomed the blushing Fong Beibei. Chapter 15:12. There was no cliched wedding plot, nor was there any bizarre mistake of the groom mispronouncing the bride's name. The Western-style wedding ended with Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei hugging and kissing, as well as the cheers and applause of all the relatives and friends. However, the whole wedding had just begun. Because everyone had moved to the resort's huge hotel, the chefs had already prepared a super luxurious feast for them. The wedding banquet's chef was hired separately. The resort's originally simple buffet chef was not worthy of this scale. Every table's drinks were slightly inferior: red wine, white wine, and soda. But the dishes that covered the sea, land, and air were all priced at 5,000 yuan per table. Of course, the most expensive was the seafood. There was abalone stewed with black ginseng, steamed lobster with scallions, braised sea cucumber with mushrooms, fish maw, and other precious seafood such as scallops. Of course, the mainland dishes and air dishes were not simple either. There was dragon and phoenix platter, Buddha jumps over the wall, Jinxiu suckling pig platter, yam stewed with 3 treasures, and so on. As for the dishes, of course, Cantonese cuisine was the main dish, with Huayang cuisine as a supplement. Because both families were from Cantonese province, the other guests could also accept these 2 dishes. In order to hold this wedding banquet, to gather the relatives and friends of both families together and have a good time, Poplar Fruit had spent a lot of money. Not to mention that his wedding was in response to the country's call to not accept betrothal gifts. Even if he accepted them, Poplar Fruit would not be able to recoup his costs. Of course, Poplar Fruit did not care about these things in the first place. As long as they were happy. While the guests were happily eating and enjoying the feast, Poplar Fruit and the rest were not idle. He and Fong Beibei, along with the mighty group of groomsmen and bridesmaids, had already started to visit their relatives and friends one by one from the private room on the 2nd floor. Most of the people were in the hall downstairs because it was lively. As for the people on the 2nd floor, they had to sit in the private room because it was lively. They were all more famous guests, like Beckham and other big stars, or high-ranking officials and dignitaries with more special identities. They could not sit among Poplar Fruit's relatives. With them around, who would be able to eat in peace? The first room they walked into was the largest private room in the innermost part of the room. The attendants were all specially selected. Sitting inside was the head of Guangdong province, Xing Yuji's father, Xing Mingsheng. Those who sat with him were people like Chen Longjiang, his father, and his family. Chen Longjiang was also there. He had a strong background and was able to talk to Xing Mingsheng. Of course, there were also leaders of Higashiyama University. Uncle Jean, who was the deputy director of the Department of Education, could only sit at the end of the table. Song Jiwen's father was a small director of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Although Poplar Fruit had asked him before, he didn't dare to use his relationship with Poplar Fruit to squeeze into this room. The majesty of the leader of Guangdong province was not something that an ordinary person could handle. This was something that young Master Wang felt the most. As the son of the richest man in the country, he was forced by his father to memorize the names of all the big shots in the country, including their families, to prevent him from fooling around and provoking others. Not to mention others, he still knew Xing Mingsheng, who often appeared on TV, and He Jiuming was a general who guarded a region. Young Master Wang, who relied on his thick skin to get the position of best man, suddenly understood why his father asked him to have a good relationship with poplar fruit. Of course, young Master Wang's shock was ignored. Let's talk about poplar fruit. When he came to this room he was very nervous. Because there was also the person that poplar fruit was most afraid to see at this time, Jing Yujie. Or perhaps the word afraid shouldn't be used, he was very guilty. Although Jing Yujie acted very magnanimous later on, as if nothing had happened, Gunyanji felt that it was strange. Even if poplar fruit brought the wedding invitation, she calmly took it. Moreover, when Yanghua suggested in a low voice, "If you're really busy, you don't have to come," Jing Yujie raised her eyebrows and snorted, "What, you're afraid that I'll go and wreak havoc in heaven? Don't worry, I am not that naive." However, Jing Yujie did not attend poplar fruit's wedding, but she did not avoid the wedding banquet. Now she also had a calm expression of an outsider. Although Jing Yujie didn't say anything, poplar fruit couldn't pretend that nothing had happened. In the beginning, Jing Yujie hugged him and pushed him, and then she would rather be his lover. This matter had no beginning or end, and poplar fruit was still scared. What's more, now that Fong Beibei and her father were here, how could poplar fruit not feel guilty? "Uncle Jing, Uncle He." Poplar fruit greeted respectfully one by one. It wasn't that he wanted to curry favor with these high-ranking officials, but these people either had some special status, such as Jing Yujie's father, Big Brother He's father, or had a deep friendship with him, such as Wang Ling's friends. But on this occasion he had to give them some face. As the highest official at the banquet, Jing Mingxing looked deeply at poplar fruit, and also looked at Fong Beibei, who was standing with poplar fruit like a golden couple, and then looked meaningfully at his daughter, who was eating silently as if she had been hungry for a few days. To poplar fruit's surprise, Jing Mingxing actually stood up with a wine glass. It didn't matter if he stood up, He Jioming and the others who had been sitting before all hurriedly stood up. Jing Mingxing smiled slightly, a very official kind of warm smile so that people couldn't see whether he was close or distant. He raised his wine glass to poplar fruit and said, "You called me uncle, so I'll take advantage of this identity to have a good chat with you." His tone was very gentle, but there was a small knife without a sharp edge hidden in it. The edgeless knife didn't hurt people, but when it was used by people at Jing Mingxing's level, it was absolutely bloody. Everyone's heart was nervous, and Zhuo, who knew the inside story, secretly complained, "Brother, why did you provoke the eldest princess of the Jing family? Look, retribution is coming." Under the official power of the head of Guangdong province, poplar fruit was fine. He pretended to be calm, but Fong Beibei's small face suddenly turned pale, and she nervously grabbed poplar fruit's clothes. "Dad." Jing Yujie couldn't bear it. She frowned and pulled Jing Mingxing's arm. "Haha, what are you all nervous about?" However, Jing Mingxing unexpectedly laughed and said, "I just want to tell poplar fruit that since you call me uncle, then this toast to the elders, right? You have to use the real thing. You can't fool me with plain water." Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that he just wanted to say this and didn't really want to make a scene at poplar fruit's wedding. Many people were still lamenting that this was Great Secretary Jing after all. His authority was too terrifying. Just a joke was enough to scare everyone. But maybe it wasn't just a scare? Jing Mingxing's little joke was a little bit of a punishment. Chapter 15-13. Will you be a little unhappy after reading these 2 chapters on New Year's Eve? Don't worry, just look forward to the ending of the Spring Festival. Xiao Han guarantees with his last bit of luck. Although it was just a joke, everyone was still shocked. However, poplar fruit laughed. At this time, no matter what the reason was, as the head of the family, he would not back down. He laughed heartily and said, that's right, Uncle Jing, I'll exchange it for real wine." In the group of groomsmen behind him, the wine that the groomsmen took was mysterious. The bottle of white wine in Song Jiwen's hand was actually an empty bottle of water. At most, half a glass of white wine would be poured into it to increase the taste of the wine. Therefore, when poplar fruit said that, Wang Yuba quickly handed over the second bottle of real white wine in his hand and poured a full glass for poplar fruit. "Uncle Jing, I'll drink first, please help yourself." Poplar fruit downed the glass in one gulp. He actually did not have a trace of resentment. After all, he had a muddled relationship with Jing Yujie. To be honest, no matter how Jing Mingxing punished him, he could only accept it. Jing Mingxing also did not intend to bully the young. He smiled and clinked glasses with poplar fruit, then took a sip and prepared to sit down. However, at this time Fong Beibei gently gritted her teeth. In her personality, although gentle, there was a hidden stubbornness. Fong Beibei turned around and forced Wang Yuba to pour her a glass of white wine. Before anyone could react, she held the glass with both hands and said in a clear voice, "Uncle Zheng, I'll also toast to you." "Oh, you're pregnant, how can you drink?" Jing Yujie exclaimed. Poplar fruit also hurriedly grabbed Fong Beibei's hand. This silly girl, her eyes were slightly red. Although she did not drink it, Fong Beibei's actions shocked these big shots. Even the calm Jing Mingxing was slightly surprised. In other words, at this moment he thought highly of Fong Beibei. In fact, today was the first time he saw Fong Beibei, or in other words, the woman who completely defeated his daughter. Although Jing Yujie was very stubborn about her marriage with her family, she had indeed made great achievements in her career. Compared to her immature brother and the group of playboys in Beijing, Jing Yujie was Jing Mingxing's pride. However, Jing Yujie was indeed defeated by Fong Beibei. She was defeated without a single chance. Previously Fong Beibei this silly boy, but now it seemed that Fong Beibei who defeated Jing Yujie was not simple. Although she looked soft and weak, there was a stubbornness in her bones that did not admit defeat and was not afraid of power. Thinking about it, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei were both on the academic path and they were together in the same school. The two of them had a lot of common topics to talk about. Jing Mingxing secretly sighed. It's not an injustice to lose. Then again, Jing Mingxing probably did not expect that the reason why Poplar Fruit did not choose Jing Yujie was not because they did not have any topics to talk about. In fact, Poplar Fruit and Jing Yujie had a lot of topics to talk about. Both of them were in the literature and translation business, so how could they not have any topics to talk about? The only thing that troubled Poplar Fruit was Jing Yujie's dedication to work and career. Jing Yujie was a charming partner, but she was definitely not a good mother. Compared to Fong Beibei, who was gentle, considerate, diligent and got along well with Kiki, Poplar Fruit might have already made a decision when they first met. Well, let's not talk about the past anymore. What's done is done and the right person has been married. It's useless to talk about it. Uncle Zheng, let me toast you on behalf of Beibei. Poplar Fruit looked at Fong Beibei lovingly and took the glass from her hand. He then slightly toasted Jing Mingxing and raised his head to finish the glass. After drinking 2 glasses of white wine with more than 40% alcohol, Poplar Fruit also felt that his throat and stomach were burning. Now that his internal energy had improved, his resistance to alcohol was also much higher than before. However, after all, he hadn't drunk for a long time, so his body needed some time to adapt. Jing Mingxing smiled slightly. He didn't feel embarrassed about such a thing. Instead, he said in a very kind voice, "This is good. The most important thing for a young couple to live together is that their hearts are connected. The more you think about each other, the more comfortable your life will be." Jing Mingxing gently raised his glass and smiled. "I wish you a happy marriage and a long life together." After that, he finished the rest of the wine in the glass in one gulp, giving Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei enough face. In the end, he was still Jing Mingxing. He had so easily reversed the image of Fong Beibei, who had accidentally caused him to bully a little kid. On the contrary, his instructions, his not putting on airs and his magnanimity in drinking, made people feel deep respect for him. However, Jing Mingxing was still very scheming. He had dug a hole for Poplar Fruit. Since he had already exchanged for real wine, when he toasted each of the elders who had helped him in the past, how could he still have the nerve to exchange for mixed wine? Because Jing Mingxing was still sitting there and watching, even if the others wanted to help, they didn't have the guts to stop Poplar Fruit from drinking. So in one round, Poplar Fruit drank close to 3 ounces of Wuliangye. Even if the alcohol content wasn't high, it was still white wine. Luckily, in the other banquets, there weren't many who were qualified to force Poplar Fruit to drink, and the relatives downstairs were even more generous. Moreover, Yongguo can still exchange for the wine mixed water after leaving this room. Otherwise, if he drank like this, Poplar Fruit would probably be sent to the hospital after a few rooms. When they came out, it was Zhu Hongzhua who sent Poplar Fruit out of the room. He closed the door and asked with concern, "Brother, are you okay?" Poplar Fruit's face was only slightly red. He smiled calmly and said, "Brother, don't worry. You know that we are martial artists, so we can't hold our liquor well." In the past, Poplar Fruit was very good at drinking, but because of the incident with Kiki, he decided to quit drinking. Now he still had his internal strength to catalyze the digestion of alcohol, so there was no problem at all. Zhu Hongzhua smiled and patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder. Without saying anything, he turned and went back to the room. Although there were some twists and turns in the first room, those who really knew the inside story were probably only Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei or Song Jiwen, but the others only felt that Poplar Fruit's connections were terrifying. After they went out of the door, they happily took a breath and said, "Let's continue." Poplar Fruit nodded, waved his hand and smiled, "Let's go." He gently held Fong Beibei's hand without leaving a trace. Poplar Fruit didn't expect her reaction to be so intense, but at this time as a man, Poplar Fruit naturally had to stand in front of her. Poplar Fruit's warm hand gently squeezed Fong Beibei's small hand, making her feel at ease. Fong Beibei smiled sweetly. "Forget it, don't take it to heart. With him by her side, other things are not a big deal." Hehe. Chapter 15-14. Will you be a little unhappy reading these 2 chapters on New Year's Eve? Don't worry, just look forward to the ending of the Spring Festival. Xiaohan guarantees with his last bit of luck. Poplar Fruit and the others had a difficult task. Although it was a wedding, they were definitely the busiest out of all of them. Chinese wedding banquets required them to visit the guests table by table. Of course, it was also to let their relatives and friends get to know their bride or groom. Fong Beibei's relatives were a little better. They felt that Poplar Fruit's reputation was a little too big, so they didn't dare to get Poplar Fruit drunk. However, Poplar Fruit's relatives were mostly from the countryside. They were used to shouting loudly and treating people warmly. Naturally, when Poplar Fruit went to propose a toast, they wouldn't hesitate to force Poplar Fruit to drink. They also knew that Poplar Fruit couldn't drink too much white wine, so they directly poured beer for him. Therefore, Poplar Fruit could escape the white wine, but he couldn't escape the glass of beer. How could he not drink? Those 7th grandpa, 8th grandpa, uncles were all relatives and neighbors who had watched him grow up. How could he not drink when his elders proposed a toast to him? Poplar Fruit's classmates and Fong Beibei's classmates also shouted for Poplar Fruit to drink. After everyone graduated, it was rare for them to get together at Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei's wedding. They were so excited that they couldn't control themselves. Therefore, Poplar Fruit couldn't help but be encouraged to drink. It was really a happy problem. If he drank too much white wine, he would get drunk, but if he drank too much beer, it wouldn't be easy to get drunk, but it would be very bloated from the stomach to the throat. Although Poplar Fruit's body was good, he was still made of meat and not a real god. After drinking more than 10 tables, he had to run to the toilet to vomit. When Fong Beibei waited for him to come out, she took a tissue to wipe his mouth and said, "Don't drink so much. Don't hurt yourself." Poplar Fruit, on the other hand, was in high spirits. His face was flushed red as he smiled and said, "It's fine, this little bit of wine can't stump your husband." Although they had been married for half a year, Fong Beibei was still a little unaccustomed to this title. She blushed and looked at the groomsmen and bridesmaids who were still a little far away. They were taking the opportunity to take a break and eat. Heaving a sigh of relief, Fong Beibei pinched Poplar Fruit's waist, pouted her pink lips and said, "You're the weird uncle. Don't deny it. You're the weird uncle." Poplar Fruit chuckled. "You only know how to laugh," Fong Beibei said angrily. She pushed Poplar Fruit and said, "Hurry up and eat something first, then we'll go." This was a little fun between the two of them. In fact, Poplar Fruit was a little drunk now. Even though he had used his internal energy to vomit out everything in his stomach, the alcohol had already seeped into his body. Although it was not to the extent of being drunk, if Poplar Fruit urged the traffic police to use the alcohol content tester, or walked in a straight line, he would probably be exposed. Let's not talk about Poplar Fruit, who had to continue to struggle and drink among the banquets. Let's go back to the big private room that Poplar Fruit had left. Although they were toasting each other, although they were in harmony, Xing Mingxing was also amiably chatting with the others about work matters and asking about some of their difficulties. Uncle Su Kai, Uncle Jin Jin, Chen Longjiang, and the others were all flattered and answered, but there was one person who seemed to be out of place. Xing Yujie lowered her head and ate. She did not care about her ladylike image, nor did she care about her father's face. Anyway, her face was dark and she ignored Xing Mingxing. Of course, she didn't behave rudely. When other people spoke to her, she would still smile and reply to them. However, when facing her own father, she was cold and indifferent, just like a little girl who was throwing a tantrum. Yes, Xing Yujie was very angry. Zheng Mingxing's sudden attack came without any warning. Xing Yujie herself only realized that Zheng Mingxing was making things difficult for Poplar Fruit. Moreover, it was in an environment that was so important to Poplar Fruit. Not only did she not feel happy, but she also felt very embarrassed. Especially when she saw Fong Beibei's stubborn look when she wanted to propose a toast. Xing Yujie felt that if there was a hole in the ground, she would want to hide in it. She even felt inexplicably sad in her heart. At first, it might be because she saw her father making things difficult for Poplar Fruit, so she was worried about Poplar Fruit. Later on, there were some sour feelings. Poplar Fruit stood up for Fong Beibei in front of her. Actually, Poplar Fruit did not do anything wrong. Xing Yujie told herself in her heart that Poplar Fruit was the groom, so it was natural for him to stand up for him. This was not the only reason. Xing Yujie also felt uncomfortable because of the friction between her father and Poplar Fruit. It was not a conflict, but this little bit of friction had already made her feel uncomfortable for a long time. Therefore, Xing Yujie put all the blame on Zheng Mingxing. If her father did not make things difficult for Poplar Fruit for no reason, if he did not make things difficult for her at all, Poplar Fruit would not have to walk around with the bride in front of her. No matter what, Xing Yujie had already turned the indescribable feeling in her heart into anger at this moment, and she transferred it to her father who had done something inappropriate. Who cares what the occasion is? Who cares how many distinguished guests are in front of you? Who cares if you will lose face and spread your dirty linen in public? Xing Yujie was like my daughter in a fit of pique, showing a face to Zheng Mingxing. But who was Zheng Mingxing? He could tell at a glance that his daughter was going to make him uncomfortable today. Although he was a little unhappy, I, your father, am standing up for you. Zheng Mingxing decisively dealt with Xing Yujie's sullen mood. He ignored it and acted as if he did not feel anything. He leisurely chatted with these guests slowly, and he did not need to take the food that Xing Yujie wanted to eat. Anyway, he did not want to provoke his daughter. Needless to say, no one knew a daughter better than a father. The effect was really amazing. Xing Yujie's face was so dark that thunder was about to rain, and she had nowhere to vent her anger. Xing Yujie could not do anything to her father. She angrily patted her chopsticks, stood up and turned to walk out. Where are you going? Zheng Mingxing finally asked. He did not blame Xing Yujie for her rude behavior. I'm going to find my staff. Xing Yujie turned her head. She did not explode. Instead, she smiled charmingly and said, It's really boring to listen to you old men talk here. In the end, it's all about national policy. Xing Yujie's temper did not necessarily have to explode. She could not explode, so she kept it in her heart. Go. Zheng Mingxing waved his hand and then ignored Xing Yujie. He smiled and said, Nephew, hurry up and pour some wine for your father. Alright, what were we talking about just now? Shui, who was the youngest among the guests, naturally became the little brother who was busy serving Xing Yujie. Although Xing Yujie was younger than him, no one dared to order her around. Xing Yujie pushed open the door of the private room and left to the corridor where the temperature was slightly lower. She did not go to the two tables where her staff were as she said. Instead, she was slightly depressed and walked slowly outside. She did not care about the slightly strange looks from the waiters in the corridor and walked slowly, full of worries. Chapter 15:15. Happy Chinese New Year, everyone. Today's finale. Actually, the entire hotel was brimming with a festive atmosphere, but Xing Yujie seemed a little out of place in the warm atmosphere. She even felt like an outsider floating in the air as she looked at the world. Because she was in a hurry when she came out, she didn't bring her jacket. Xing Yujie didn't have the intention to go back and get it. Her body was a little cold and she had to hug her shoulders with both hands. The corridor wasn't quiet. In each of the private rooms, other than the one Xing Yujie's father was in, there were a few rooms with big celebrities or important people. The doors to the other rooms were all open. Naturally, the noise from inside was rather unpleasant to the ears. Xing Yujie came to a place where it wasn't so noisy. She leaned against the railing and looked down in a daze. Her line of sight was already firmly glued to that man's body. He was always so unique. Even if he kept a low profile, he was always the same as today. No matter where he went, he would always be the center of attention. He was always so elegant and handsome. His every movement was so natural. A slight smile from him was enough to make her heart beat faster. A glance from him was enough to make her want to laugh. Of course, he was still so cute when he was a little drunk. Swaying, he spoke a little louder. His big tongue, which had always been very clear, was also very funny. And also he was so handsome today. The white suit seemed to have been made for him. No matter how she looked at it, she felt that he was 360 degrees handsome without any blind spots. However, Jing Yujie's head and gaze were a little stiff as they shifted slightly. Her mood couldn't be good anymore. His face was flushed red, he was flushed with success, and he was laughing wildly. It was all for the woman beside him. Even Jing Yujie herself didn't want to deny that Fong Beibei was really beautiful today. The wedding dress that was so beautiful that all women wanted to have matched her very well. Actually, Jing Yujie really didn't care about the wedding dress. She only felt sad because of a fact. It was such a grand wedding, but the bride standing beside him wasn't her. Poplar Fruit was happily drinking wine and introducing the bride to his relatives and friends, but it still had nothing to do with her. Jing Yujie's heart felt empty. It was as if it was in pain. But she didn't want to cry here and show her weakness to others. But now she really felt like she was going to lose him forever, lose the whole world. And now, the lively atmosphere seemed to have become her greatest mockery. Just as her mood continued to sink, suddenly, there was a commotion in the corridor. There were many children talking loudly. Kiki. Her thoughts, Jing Yujie couldn't help but look over there. Didn't I tell you? There aren't that many people upstairs. It's so noisy downstairs. This was Dejun's voice. The little boy was a little proud. The children's arms. S's, and S's ants. Among them, in addition to Kiki, Dejun and Kong Kong, who recorded, "Where are we going, Daddy?" There were also a few active children from Xiong village and Kiki's kindergarten friends. Of course, the adults weren't completely at ease with the children running around. Xiong Xiaolin, the big sister who was already in her teens, was responsible for looking after them. Anyway, they couldn't run outside the hotel. In the hotel it was fine to make a little noise. I also think it's noisy. They're all so loud. Kiki giggled and waved her hand in front of her nose. She pouted and said, "They're all drinking." Sinks. What's so strange about that? My dad often drinks. Kong Kong said calmly. My dad often drinks too. Xiong Xiaofeng and Xiong Anshuan nodded in agreement. Jing Yujie stood on the other side of the corridor and looked at them. Listening to the children's chatter, her mood became a little better. But the children didn't notice her. Kiki pouted and said, "Drinking? It's not good. My dad didn't drink before." Before anyone answered, Kong Kong looked to the side and asked curiously, "Xian, why are you holding a bottle of wine?" This time, everyone's attention was attracted to Xian. Only then did everyone realize that Xian himself was holding a bottle of white wine in his hand. Xian with curly hair was confused for a while before he remembered and said, "Oh, my mom told me not to let my dad drink, so she told me to take the wine away." She told little chubby Xian to hide the wine. She didn't expect him to be holding it in a daze. At this time a boy laughed and said, "We also have wine to drink. I recognize this wine. It's called Jian Nan Chun." Another good friend from Kiki's kindergarten said proudly, "Reminiscence of the Tang dynasty, Jian Nan Chun." Looking at him waving his small hand and his imposing manner, he really did look like he was selling advertisements. "We can't drink," Kiki said weakly. I know. The boy waved his hand, laughed and said, "I'm just learning." He took the bottle from Xian and held it with great difficulty. Then he toasted Kong Kong Gij, who he admired the most. "Kong Kong Gij, let me toast to you." It seemed that he had seen a lot of adults drinking. Bowing and lowering his head, that action was really perfect. Kong Kong also laughed and took it and said, "Okay, I'll drink too." Then the few boys laughed and swayed left and right as if they were drunk. Only Kiki was more obedient. The little girl pouted and said, "Don't be like this. It's not good to drink." Seeing this, Jing Yujie walked out and took the bottle from Kong Kang's hand. She smiled and said, "Okay. Don't play with the wine here. If it falls and breaks, it will be cut and bleeding." The little guys saw Jing Yujie. The others didn't know her, but when they saw the adults, They instinctively shrank back as if they had done something wrong. Were they too unrestrained just now? Aunt Jing, you're here too? Only Kiki recognized that it was Jing Yujie's Aunt Xing who would buy her the best gifts every year. The little girl happily jumped up and hugged Jing Yujie's arm and shook it. Jing Yujie didn't know why, but when Kiki held her hand, her heart trembled slightly. She smiled and gently touched Kiki's hair and the soft dress behind her back and said, "Of course, it's such a big day, how can Aunt not come?" Chapter 15-16. Happy Chinese New Year, everyone. Today's finale. But I didn't see Auntie Jing just now. Kiki pouted and said coquettishly, "Auntie Jing is biased. She didn't even look at Kiki when she came. Isn't Kiki dressed pretty today?" It turned out that the little girl wanted to show off her beautiful outfit today. In Kiki's opinion, among the people she knew, Jing Yujie was the one who knew how to dress up and buy clothes the best. When she recorded the first episode of Where is Dad Going?, many of her clothes were picked out by Jing Yujie. Jing Yujie's mood was affected by the little girl. She finally had a little sunshine. She smiled and said, "Because Auntie knows that Kiki is very busy today. So I didn't come to disturb you." "You didn't disturb me." Kiki giggled and said, "Okay, I forgive you." "Thank you." Jing Yujie smiled and gently pinched the little girl's face. She said, "Okay, you guys continue to play. I'm going out for a walk." "Goodbye, Auntie Jing." Kiki waved her hand obediently. Jing Yujie carried the wine in her hand and walked downstairs. The little fellows couldn't follow her there, but she wanted to be alone for a while. However, behind Jing Yujie, the little guys became lively again and chattered non-stop. "I think that auntie is so beautiful. She's as beautiful as Kiki Jiejie." This time it was Xian Xian's heartfelt praise. I think Auntie Jing is more beautiful." Kiki smiled embarrassedly. When Jing Yujie walked down the stairs, she looked back at the little guys. She suddenly felt a sense of loss. Why was that? Although her whole body was covered with a layer of faint negative energy, all she thought about was her love that had been thwarted before it had even begun. However, Jing Yujie's thoughts were actually very clear at the moment. She knew why she looked back reluctantly and why her heart was moved when she was being intimate with Kiki. After all, she was still in her 30s. It turned out that she was strong before because she thought that she was still a young girl in her 20s. When she really touched her heart, she realized that she was no longer an exception. At this age, women not only did they yearn for a strong, reliable and warm embrace, but they also yearned for a happy, warm and happy family from the bottom of their hearts. In other words, she wanted to have a child. She wanted a child who could act coquettishly with her. She wanted a child who would cry and make a fuss before she went to work. She wanted a child who could not wait to jump into her arms and say, "I miss you so much," when she returned home. Yes, Jing Yujie wanted to be called Auntie Mom. Thinking about it, she Auntie Jing Auntie day eyes. Aunties. It wasn't really outside the hotel. Because the hotel was a little like a crescent moon, it formed a double arc with the multi-purpose fitness center next to it. Of course, there was nothing new about it. After all, there were many buildings that were circular, not to mention this curved one. The empty space in the middle was made into a unique little garden. It was still very beautiful. However, the resort was booked by Poplar Fruit today, and the guests were all at the wedding banquet, so Jing Yujie was the only one left in the little garden. It was still 3 in the afternoon. The sun was high in the sky and the garden was warm. It was more comfortable than the brightly lit house. Jing Yujie came to a swing in the garden and sat on it gently, but she didn't have the mood to swing. She could see the inside through the glass wall. There were tables of people, but the most eye-catching ones were the bride and groom's group. Jing Yujie looked at Poplar Fruit's smiling face, and there was no need to mention the bitterness in her heart. She unscrewed the cap of Jian Nanchun and gently took a sip. It seemed that she hadn't drunk baijiu for a long time. Since she became the president of the publishing house, or rather the CEO, her status was different. No higher-ups would ask her to drink alcohol, and no one would ask for baijiu at those banquets. So after taking a sip, the spicy taste of alcohol exploded in her mouth. Jing Yujie frowned and could only endure the taste. Drinking away your sorrows makes you even more sorrowful. Jing Yujie gently turned the bottle of wine. It was 45% alcohol. Her beautiful smile was a little bitter. Her long legs, which were wearing black stockings, gently touched the ground, causing the swing to sway slightly. But my sorrows are too strong and they can't be stronger than this bar? Jing Yujie sighed and took another sip. He was not in a hurry. She drank very slowly, a little at a time. A little bit of spiciness, a little bit of tipsiness, and a little bit of the past came to her mind. What stupid idea did she have to meet this brat in the first place? She still remembered that it was the craziest choice she had ever made in her career. Without any warning, there was no way to persuade Poplar Fruit to join the translation team on the internet. Jing Yujie resolutely carried a small suitcase in her bag, and directly took a plane across the whole of China from Beijing to Yangqing. Now that she remembered the crazy energy at that time and Poplar Fruit's stunned expression, she felt regretful but also very sweet. Yes, that time was very happy. She pretended to be crazy and stayed in Poplar Fruit's house, accompanied him to play basketball and accompanied him to drink, and then she was carried back by him. The happiest thing was the next day when she woke up and ate the breakfast he prepared. Unfortunately, the holidays were a little short. The happy time they lived together was only a few days. Thinking about the past, Jing Yujie could not help but take a big sip of alcohol. When it came to matters of the heart, Poplar Fruit seemed to be very firm, but he was really a little soft. She calculated the time. At that time, if she didn't hold back that damn restraint, she was afraid that Yangguo wouldn't have passed by her. Yes. When Poplar Fruit met Fong Beibei, although she did not appear at that time, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei only had a poetic and picturesque encounter. Although Jing Yujie did not ask Poplar Fruit about these stories, Jing Yujie was very clear about it after so many media interviews. During this period, how many stories had she and Poplar Fruit experienced? There were times when they were attacked by the media, and there were times when they joined forces to argue with the media. There were also times when they were drunk in the hotel. At that time, she had already foolishly fallen in love with this little boy, and had already decided that she would not marry anyone other than Poplar Fruit. But how could a girl confess to a boy? Jing Yujie was one step behind and she was one step behind. Until now, she could no longer catch up with Poplar Fruit's footsteps. Chapter 15-17. The final episode will be updated at 5 p.m. Really? Jing Yujie knew that Poplar Fruit had feelings for her. Moreover, he was in a period of emotional emptiness at that time. Not to mention pushing him down. If she confessed, Poplar Fruit would definitely not be able to withstand it. Then with Poplar Fruit's personality, Jing Yujie thought that she could also treat Poplar Fruit as well as Fong Beibei. Then their relationship would be very strong. Perhaps the woman who was dressed so beautifully and smiled so happily at the wedding today would not be Fong Beibei, but herself. Really, if only she had been stupid at that time, or if only she had gone crazy again. Perhaps she wouldn't have to be late to confess, cry and shout, offer her body to Yangguo, and even throw away all her dignity as a lover. She wouldn't even be able to get a chance from Yangguo. Perhaps others would think that it was ridiculous and that she was not treating herself as a human, but who knew how much Jing Yujie wanted to use everything in exchange for Poplar Fruit's cherish. In the face of love we are all fools, right? Jing Yujie had unknowingly drunk half a bottle of white wine. Her alcohol tolerance was actually not bad, but this was white wine. Moreover, when one poured wine on one's worries, one would get drunk on oneself. Jing Yujie drank and drank, her face full of tears. As she drank and drank, she gradually forgot about the time. As she drank and drank, she did not drink at all. Instead, she raised her wrist mechanically, and the wine bottle had already slipped to the ground. It did not break, but the fragrant wine gurgled out, almost making the small garden drunk. The warm sun was already setting and the gentle wind was still blowing. That poor person had already fallen asleep leaning against the rope of the swing. In the hotel, the banquet was still bustling with noise and excitement. Although everyone's stomachs were full, it was rare for them to eat and drink at such a high-end occasion. No one was willing to leave early. There were still many delicious dishes left on the table. Moreover, the waiter was still serving dishes from time to time. After the main dishes were finished, there were still a few desserts. Since he couldn't bear to part with it, he might as well stand up and chat with his neighbors at the next table and the table next to him. After he digested the food, he would come back to fight with the food. When it came to networking, those who were thick-skinned or those who hadn't had enough to drink ran to the main table with their wine glasses to drink with Poplar Fruit, who had just sat down and eaten 2 mouthfuls of food. Poplar Fruit was also drunk. Song Jiwen's group of groomsmen had long been playing on their own. They had no intention of taking care of Poplar Fruit. Song Jiwen even smiled and said to Fong Beibei, it's rare to be happy. Let him drink. As a result, the food that Fong Beibei picked up fell on his clothes, and his white suit suddenly became greasy. But he didn't notice it at all. Fong Beibei exclaimed softly and wanted to give Poplar Fruit a tissue to wipe it, but her hand was caught by Poplar Fruit. Baby! Poplar Fruit looked at Fong Beibei softly from time to time. He gently held her little hand and said softly, "Baby, do you know?" At this time, there was a piece of vegetable hanging in front of his chest, and then he said sweetly, "Meeting you is the blessing of several lifetimes. I will love you forever." Song Jiwen popped up and looked at Poplar Fruit. He nodded affirmatively. This guy is drunk. Don't ruin the atmosphere. Chin Anlin gave him a knock on the head. They were originally very happy to watch a romantic drama. "Nonsense, I'm not drunk," Poplar Fruit said stubbornly, but his head was really dizzy and his words were slurred. Fong Beibei covered her mouth and smiled. She was actually very happy to hear her husband's drunken mannerisms. She pinched the vegetable on Poplar Fruit's clothes and wiped it with a tissue. "Who will help me take him back to his room?" Fong Beibei directly took over control of Poplar Fruit and said to Song Jiwen and Chen Anlin. Chapter 15-18. Before Poplar Fruit could finish his sentence, Fong Beibei sealed his mouth with her finger. "Don't say you're not drunk. Be good and go back to sleep." Fong Beibei, who was already very motherly, became even more motherly after she got pregnant. She coaxed the drunk Poplar Fruit like she was coaxing a baby. As expected, Poplar Fruit was obedient. Song Jiwen then carried Poplar Fruit on his shoulder. Of course, Song Jiwen couldn't do it alone, but Chin Anlin was very strong. The two of them worked together to lift Poplar Fruit. Actually, Poplar Fruit could still walk, but his footsteps were light and he didn't exert any strength. "Just follow us. What's the use of a pregnant woman like you?" Chin Anlin laughed. Fong Beibei then put down her hand resentfully. She took out the room card from Poplar Fruit's pocket and walked in front, muttering, "What do you mean by pregnant woman? Sounds so bad. I can't even tell, alright. I'm still a beautiful girl." It didn't matter that the bride and groom had returned to their rooms. There were still a bunch of groomsmen and bridesmaids, as well as Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei's family members presiding over the scene. Let's return to the little garden. After some time, Jing Yujia's head slipped and she nearly fell off the swing. This short physical reaction allowed her to regain a little consciousness. But it was very, very shallow. The alcohol had already numbed her thoughts. What was left was only her instincts. Eventually, she couldn't control herself and slowly slid to the ground. She almost sat on the wet spot where the wine bottle had slipped. Fortunately, although she was sitting on the ground, her hands were holding onto the seat of the swing as a pillow. It looked like she was sleeping on the table. Jing Yujia's actions seemed to be stuck in a movie, or even a slow-motion movie. She stopped countless times and after an unknown amount of time she reluctantly took out her phone. Squinting her drowsy eyes, Jing Yujia trembled as she found Poplar Fruit's phone number and dialed it. She didn't have any ability to think. She was just relying on her instincts, or perhaps she was urged by the thoughts that had been nagging her for a long time, to make this call. Beep. Beep. The sound was a little far but also a little close, as if it had been waiting for a long time. But in the end the call was connected. She didn't put the phone to her ear, nor did she turn on the speaker function. For someone like her who had lost her ability to think, it was very, very difficult for her to make even a small movement. She seemed to have heard Poplar Fruit's magnetic voice. However, she didn't want to hear what Poplar Fruit had to say. She just wanted to say all the words in her heart, all the words that came from her heart all at once. Poplar Fruit. Sob sob. Even if it was Jing Yujia at this moment, it was normal for her to cry. It was also normal for her to cry bitterly. Her thoughts were in a mess and she couldn't control the sadness in her heart. You got married today. Sob sob, why did you get married? Sob sob, I know. You got married today. Jing Yujie's words were already without any logic to speak of. Her words were incoherent, and it was hard for anyone to understand what she was saying. Fortunately, at least there was no one beside her to see her appearance, and no one heard what she said except for the person on the other end of the phone. I didn't want to disturb your happiness. Sob sob, I really didn't. I'm not a bad person. I just feel bad in my heart, so bad. Don't talk. Listen to me. Listen to me, okay? Words like Yujie came from the phone, and Jing Yujie couldn't hear clearly. She could only cry and interrupt. What's wrong with me? I don't want status. You don't want it. I know you like me. I know you like me. I don't want to destroy your family. I just want to be with you. It's been so long. So long. Why won't you give me a chance? You won't give me a chance. Her voice lowered and it seemed like she was about to fall asleep. I'm not drunk. I can hold my liquor so well. How could I get drunk? Sob sob. You're lying. Jing Yujie patted her swing and cried out unhappily. I have so much to say. So much to say. Let me finish, okay? When I'm done, I won't bother you anymore. I swear. Sob 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 sob. Although the words were not controlled by the brain, every sentence came from the bottom of the heart. Every sentence came from the heart. When the heart hurt, the cries naturally came. Jing Yujie's thoughts were in a mess. She didn't know why, but she suddenly laughed foolishly. Poplar fruit, I heard a song a long time ago. I really wanted to sing it for you. Can you listen to me sing, okay? Just listen to me sing once. Otherwise I'll feel bad. Sob sob. The other side hesitated for a moment, but still gave an answer. There was a long silence. It wasn't clear if Jing Yujie was brewing her emotions or if she had blacked out. Anyway, it took a long time for her to sing. Her voice was very soft, very light, and a little vague. Just once is enough. Take me to see the end of the world. The tone wasn't very obvious. It sounded a little like she was reading a book. Xiao Han slightly changed the lyrics to fit the mood. The song is from Charlotte's Troubles. It's very nice. I recommend everyone to listen to it when they're watching it. In the sunshine, in the bright days, laughing heartily. In the free, noisy air. It seemed that she had found a little rhythm. Do you know the only thing I want? However, she felt that it was wrong. She waved her hands and cried. I sang wrong. I didn't sing the first half. Sob sob, I want to sing a song for you, but I can't sing it well. It's my fault that you don't like it. Sob sob. After a while she asked carefully, sing one more time, okay? Okay? If someone heard it and didn't notice the phone in her hand, they would definitely think that she was crazy and talking nonsense to herself. I want to see you laugh, I want to play with you. I want to throw myself into your arms. It seemed that she had found the feeling this time and sang very well. 1 second we were quarreling with a red face, the next second we turned around and made up. She sang well. Wasn't it because she had listened to this song thousands of times? I'm not afraid of you crying, I'm not afraid of you screaming because you're my pride. A pair of eyes chasing after you, my heart is already prepared. As she sang up to this point, she unknowingly started to sob again. She sang intermittently, just once is enough. You take me to see the end of the world. In the bright and sunny days we laughed to our heart's content, she sobbed. Her singing wasn't good, but it seemed that she had poured all her emotions into it. The endless sadness in her happy reverie was intoxicating. The world is still small. I'll accompany you to the ends of the earth. In the corners without worries I'll stop searching. In the carefree time I'll slowly grow old. Do you know my heartbeat? Jump as you wish. At the end of the last sentence. Jump as you wish. Jing Yujie muttered this sentence and repeated it several times. It was as if she was immersed in her own world. She even turned a deaf ear to the continuous calls on the phone. Sob 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 sob. Finally, Jing Yujie burst into even louder crying. Her phone fell unknowingly. She leaned on the swing and her head hung between her arms. She couldn't help but cry out loud. As she cried and cried, the alcohol came to her again. She didn't even know when she fell asleep again. It seemed like a long time had passed, but it also seemed like not much time had passed. Anyway, the sun was gradually setting in the west. Enchanting. A voice, accompanied by an earth-shaking shake, forced Jing Yujie to wake up from her dreams. Jing Yujie raised her head. Her messy bangs and blurry eyes were slightly red and swollen. She looked for a long time but still couldn't recognize who it was. Who is it? Why are you calling me aunt? I'm still young. I'm Kiki. Really was Kiki. The little girl's big eyes blinked in confusion. She asked doubtfully, Aunt Xing, why are you sleeping here? Have you been drinking? Sinks. Although her consciousness was in a mess and her memory was fragmented, she wouldn't remember what happened just now. However, Xing Yujie still managed to remember Kiki. Moreover, the little girl's voice was as pleasant as a silver bell, which somewhat reduced her drunkenness. Nonsense, aunt, I smell good. How can I be smelly? Xing Yujie giggled. She pulled the rope of the swing and struggled to get up. Her legs were a little weak, but she seemed to be able to walk. And drinking is bad for the body, Kiki said worriedly. Kiki is so obedient. Don't worry about aunt. Xing Yujie gradually sobered up in front of the child. Of course, she was still far from sobering up. She was still feeling tipsy. However, she didn't want to lose too much face. She looked around and asked doubtfully, Kiki, why did you come out? Go back, go back. It's not safe outside. I came out to look for you. Kiki obediently held Xing Yujie's hand and said, My papa wants you to go to his room. Go to his room? Go to his room? Why? Xing Yujie was absent-minded for a moment. She remembered that Kiki's father was Poplar Fruit. I don't know. Kiki was also a little confused and said, He just wants you to go. Hee, your father, I just want to settle accounts with him. Xing Yujie didn't know what she thought of and actually laughed. Why do you want to settle accounts with my papa? Kiki asked puzzledly. Because he owes me money. Xing Yujie said. She seemed to be very satisfied with her quick thinking. How much money does my papa owe you? Kiki blinked her big eyes and said, My papa saved some pocket money for me. I'll return it to you on his behalf, okay? No need for you. Xing Yujie touched Kiki's little head. She pulled her, stumbled to stand up and then walked into the hotel. Which room is your father in? I'll tell him that since Kiki is so obedient he doesn't need to return the money. Kiki laughed happily. Aunt Xing, you're so nice. Now I'll take you to my papa's room. Let's go. Xing Yujie really didn't let people have peace of mind. She didn't walk straight but crooked. She even needed Kiki's help to support her. Passing by the hotel lobby, Feng Beibei happened to be chatting with the relatives who were about to leave. When she saw Kiki and the others, she turned her head. Kiki also happily looked at Feng Beibei and waved her hand. Feng Beibei gently touched her slightly bulging belly that was hidden under her clothes and revealed a slight smile. The end of the book. The ending speech will be released later. The new book is in preparation. This book has cheated a lot of readers, but I still hope that everyone can give Xiaohan a little more confidence. The next book won't have this kind of romantic tone. Let's go with the authentic novel. Chapter 15-19. This was the first time Xiaohan had finished writing a book. It was the same as when Xiaohan first typed the first chapter of the book on the keyboard and embarked on the path of becoming a web novelist, but not an author. The first time was always a little nerve-wracking. In the past, when reading other people's books, they would either clap their hands in praise, laugh out loud, feel indignant, or curse the author. But now that it was their turn to write a book, they felt like they were in two completely different worlds. Because as an author working hard to write a novel, it was like how Poplar Fruit carefully took care of his daughter who had suddenly descended into this world. Xiaohan would be happy because of everyone's support and have more motivation to write. Xiaohan would be sad because of everyone's criticism and secretly feel conflicted for a long time. Really, even though Xiaohan did not have much time to reply to everyone's comments, Xiaohan really did read them one by one. Xiaohan would also have doubts about herself because of the dismal results. She even had the thought of canceling the book early on. But as an author, Xiaohan realized that she could not be like a reader and just throw the book aside after seeing a bad one. Just as Xiaohan had said, this book was as important to Xiaohan as Kiki was to Poplar Fruit. When she started writing this book, Xiaohan loved her like she was raising her own child. Even if the results were not ideal, Xiaohan still persevered. In the end, in more than a year and a half, May 2014 to February 2016, the book was completed with 3.5 million words. Xiaohan herself did not expect to write so much. Rather than saying that this was a milestone, it was better to say that Xiaohan had persevered on the long path of becoming a web novelist. She might still be far from success, but wasn't there such a saying? You might not succeed if you persevere, but if you don't persevere, you definitely won't succeed. Since the results were dismal, why did she have to persevere with My Fairy Lady? On one hand, it was because there were readers who had been supporting Xiaohan all this while. Although this was not the entire reason, the support from their subscriptions, recommendations, and reviews had given Xiaohan a lot of strength to persevere. At least when Xiaohan was writing, you guys were watching. On the other hand, there was Kiki. Kiki was an image created by Xiaohan. In other words, it was the image of a daughter that Xiaohan dreamed of having. Yes, regarding the gender of the child, Xiaohan liked a girl very much, far more than the typical Cantonese people who wanted to have a boy. If he had a choice, Xiaohan really hoped that in his future marriage Xiaohan could have his own daughter. She could be held in the palm of his hand and dote on in every possible way. She could also be a considerate little cotton-padded jacket when her father was sad. Because Kiki was created by Xiaohan, Xiaohan had to complete the story and create the perfect image of the character and not give up halfway. Kiki was already more than 4 years old now. She was at her cutest age. If he continued writing, there would be a lot of changes. Didn't they say that a girl would change 18 times between childhood and womanhood? Of course, Kiki would become more and more beautiful. However, Xiaohan felt that it was time to wrap it up. This was because when Kiki grew up, Xiaohan might not be able to handle her well. Why not let time stop? In our memories, Kiki was still the cute, sensible, and smart little girl that we loved the most. Of course, there was another reason for Xiaohan to persevere. Little Han understood one thing, and that was that success wasn't something that could be easily achieved. Authors who could become famous with just one book were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. Many great authors relied on books that failed one after another to accumulate their experience. But if he gave up the book because of bad results, then starting a new book would just be walking down the wrong path again. Therefore, Xiaohan had to finish writing it and find his own problems in the process. There were too many problems with this book. Many readers had mentioned it before, and Xiaohan also understood it very well. For example, everyone was complaining about the problems with Fong Beibei's character. Almost all of the readers had the same opinion. Fong Beibei was not suitable to be the female lead. That's right. Xiaohan also agreed with everyone's opinion. But Xiaohan did not agree that Fong Beibei was not suitable for Poplar Fruit. Why did he say that? Fong Beibei's image was actually created to be a good wife and mother. However, this character was more difficult to arrange for the plot. Her personality was gentle and considerate. She knew how to take care of people and children. Her concept of family and love was more important than anything else. This also meant that she was unlikely to have conflicts with her family because of work or other matters. Everything would be led by her family. Of course, it was also because Xiaohan's writing skills were not good enough. He could not write Xiaohan's original idea of a girl next door who was a good wife and mother. It was worlds apart from Xiaohan's imagination. For a fast-paced and straightforward web novel, the image of a good wife and mother was really too difficult to survive. What more a female lead? In comparison, a girl with a prominent personality such as the cold and simple Duan Xueqing or the domineering and mature Jing Yujie was more likable than Fong Beibei. Alright, Xiaohan did not deny this point. In Xiaohan's new book after the new year, he would pay more attention to the choice of the main and supporting characters. He also did not want the supporting characters to steal the limelight from the main character. But Xiaohan felt that there was no dispute about the Poplar Fruit's choice of Jing Yujie or Fong Beibei. Everyone thought about it. Although Jing Yujie was a mature woman who dared to love and hate and had a cute personality, she put most of her energy into work. This was her shortcoming. Compared to Fong Beibei, who had liked Kiki since she was young and had taken care of Kiki better than Poplar Fruit. If Poplar Fruit did not choose her, would he really choose Jing Yujie, who was still far away in Beijing at that time? Perhaps Poplar Fruit was alone, or it could be said that the main character in other novels would not be a problem for him to choose Jing Yujie. She was beautiful and charming, loved and hated according to her heart. She did not play pretend with Poplar Fruit. Moreover, she was so capable and had such a background. She must be a goddess among goddesses. But Poplar Fruit was not alone. He was a single father of a child. He was a little father with a slightly lower EQ and a slightly higher IQ. In this novel that leaned towards reality, Poplar Fruit would choose Fong Beibei for his daughter. Moreover, don't forget that when Poplar Fruit met Fong Bebe, he had a moment of excitement. The first impression was very important. Alright, after saying so much, this was only Xiao Han's initial idea. However, Xiao Han did not expect that in terms of the portrayal of Fong Bebe, Xiao Han had done so badly that he had disappointed everyone. Xiao Han expressed his deep apologies. In this book, Xiao Han had done what he had said before. He did not start a harem. In fact, there was no harem at the end of the book, right? Ahem. Why did he not start a harem? This was not because Xiao Han was pretentious, nor was it because Xiao Han did not understand the mainstream of online literature. It was because he was restricted by the framework of this book. It was like how a movie with children watching it could not be restricted. With Kiki's existence, Poplar Fruit had to take responsibility as a father. He could not be very casual when it came to relationships. At the very least, it had to conform to the current state of society. Otherwise, how bad would it be for a child? Right. As for what happened after the big ending, Xiao Han expressed that what they thought might not be right, but it could also be Xiao Han's idea. In any case, Kiki did not know. Alright, the big ending was actually thought of before the book was even started. Xiao Han had already decided on how to deal with Xing Yujie. Therefore, Xiao Han had been very calm and made Sister Xing unhappy. Then, everyone scolded Xiao Han unhappily. The way Duan Xueqing was handled was a little unexpected. Originally, Duan Xueqing's role was a pure supporting character. However, Xiao Han did not expect everyone to be so crazy about a pure supporting character. Xiao Han did not know whether to laugh at that time. Xiao Han seemed to have brought a character to life. Or should he cry? Bringing a supporting character to life and writing the main character poorly was definitely a mistake. Duan Xueqing's accident almost disrupted Xiao Han's rhythm. In other words, the book almost collapsed. Xiao Han was very sorry. He could only give Duan Xueqing the cold shoulder. Originally, in Xiao Han's design, although Duan Xueqing was cheated and Poplar Fruit was cheated, there was actually not much loss. On the contrary, the big liar Pai Din One could still be saved. Bai was indeed a photographer. However, his partner could not refuse the threat of the villain. He also did not have the ability to fight against the big forces. Therefore, he made a mistake. Xiao Han's original plan was to let him uncover this mystery. Xiao Han also wrote this. He resolutely fought with Li Zichao for the Duan Xueqing that he fell in love with. Then, with the help of Poplar Fruit, he finally defeated Li Zichao. Duan Xueqing certainly would not forgive him so easily. Bai, who had turned over a new leaf, would pursue Duan Xueqing again. He would work hard as a pursuer and finally win Duan Xueqing's heart. However, everyone seemed to hate Bai to the core. This was something that Xiao Han could not figure out. Could it be that Xiao Han had written him too badly in the beginning? Because he was a supporting character, Xiao Han did not write about his struggles. This might be a shortcoming. Perhaps everyone did not want to see a small antagonist actually suppress the main character and finally counterattack the character he liked. However, Duan Xueqing was really just a supporting character. Alright, Xiao Han had no choice but to comply with the public's wishes and give Bai an ending where they perished together. As for Duan Xueqing's ending, it was not so wonderful after the changes. It was all Xiao Han's fault. Everyone's complaints were right. Xiao Han also did not do well in one area, and that was the rhythm of the book. The rhythm of a web novel was very important. Xiao Han had been reading web novels for 10 years, but after he wrote it, he realized that he could not grasp it. Perhaps this was due to the limitations of the story, but in the end, it was because Xiao Han did not have enough writing skills and did not prepare the outline well. In the next book, Xiao Han must let everyone see Xiao Han's improvement. Alright. Xiao Han was really not good at writing, nor did he have any thoughts of writing. When everyone saw Xiao Han write such a long, "Where are we going, Daddy?" it was actually because of Xiao Han's stubbornness. The inspiration for this book actually came from the first season of Where Are We Going, Daddy? And it was also written when the second season of Where Are We Going, Daddy? Was aired. To be honest, Xiao Han really liked this show. From the first season, he especially liked the 5 children, especially Sendai and Kimi. In the second season, Xiao Han liked Toto, and because of that, he had the idea of having an obedient daughter. Bringing his daughter with him to Where Are We Going was also Xiao Han's dream. Originally, Xiao Han had planned to write a second season, and Kiki could also replace Toto or Belle's role. However, at the beginning of 2015, before the third season began, the second season's guests and the production team had all sorts of arguments. The relationship between the father and the child was not that good. And it was impossible for the first season. After all, Kiki was only a little more than a year old in 2013. Later he realized that the third season was the most suitable. And coincidentally, Kiki's character and image were close to 90% compatible with the third season's summer. One had to know that when Xiaohan started writing Kiki, Xiaohan did not even know who Summer's father was. And so Xiaohan wrote the third season. And because the third season was very successful, Summer's image on screen was also deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. It more or less affected Xiaohan, so it was especially difficult to write. Not to mention surpassing, even Xiaohan felt that it was not easy to break through Summer's limitations. In the end, everyone saw a Kiki that was very similar to Summer's. But Xiaohan felt that it was different. Kiki still had her unique side, smart, sensible, and loved her father. Moreover, Xiaohan deliberately told Kiki not to pamper Nuyi like Summer, but to get along well with the other children. For such young children, friendship was the most precious thing to them. Writing such a long "Where are we going, Daddy?" was indeed a little bland. Please forgive Xiaohan for being willful for the last time. Xiaohan's update speed was also something that everyone criticized. Because of this, Xiaohan also felt that it was a pity. After all, Xiaohan was an office worker and did not put in much effort in writing. He could barely maintain 3 updates a day. When he got busy before the Spring Festival, he could only maintain 2 updates. He hoped that there would be better improvements in the future. He worked hard to accumulate more chapters and strived to give everyone the benefits that Xiaohan did not dare to ask for in the past. After writing non-stop for more than a year and a half, Xiaohan had experienced a lot. It was not only the failures and struggles in the novel, but also a lot of pressure in reality. For example, the losses and gains in relationships, the incomprehension and even criticism of his family and friends, and the considerations for his life and future. There was even a long period of time when Xiaohan spent it in a state of confusion, loss, and sadness. Naturally, his writing was also affected by it. But Xiaohan would not complain to everyone. Because in order to pursue his dreams, he would have to go through a lot of setbacks, endure a lot of obstacles in reality, and lose a lot. This was Xiaohan's own choice. But Xiaohan would continue to work hard unswervingly for the sake of his dreams and to be able to contribute better works to everyone. He already had a concept for his new book. It would still be an urban novel, but the style would be very different from this novel. It would be a light novel, but some of the styles would not change. Xiaohan would also work hard to create a male and female lead that everyone would like. However, he had not started publishing it yet, nor had he started writing it. As he was too busy with work before the Spring Festival this year, Xiaohan had also rushed back home and worked hard to finish this novel. But during the Spring Festival, Xiaohan would adjust his state of mind and work hard to come up with a better idea for his new book. When he returned from the Spring Festival, Xiaohan would start anew. And for a new journey, Xiaohan sincerely invited everyone to set off with Xiaohan. This time, Xiaohan guaranteed that he would not disappoint everyone. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.